Number 5. The Conjuring. Now, if you're a fan of this channel, no doubt you know all about Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famed demonologists with a storied career in investigating the paranormal and unknown. You probably knew as well that The Conjuring was based on real events, but how much do you know about the real story that inspired the mega hit? Well, just like the film, in 1971, the Perron family moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Rhode Island with their 5 daughters. Almost as soon as they could start unpacking their things, however, they began to notice bizarre happenings around the home. It all started pretty small, just weird little things. Objects moving, a broom being found in a room different from where it was left. The girls would say that they'd see spirits floating around the halls, but you know how kids are. The mother, Carolyn, researched the house's history to see if there was anything that suggested it was a ground for spiritual activity. She discovered that the house had been home to one family for 8 generations. Not that scary. She also discovered that many members of this family all passed away under mysterious circumstances. Pretty scary. Now, just like the film, they learned at one point the house was owned by a woman named Bethesda, who was thought to be a Satanist and a witch. One of Perron's daughters thought that Bethesda's spirit threatened her mother's presence. And just like in the films, the Warrens found their way to the Perrons and performed a seance to try and speak to Bethesda and claimed they saw Carolyn Perron speaking in tongues during the seance. Now, where the movie differs slightly is that in the film, Ed Warren performs an exorcism and heroically saves the family and cleanses the house. But in the real story, the Warrens were sent away because the Perrons were worried about Carolyn's mental health. They also did not perform an exorcism, as Lorraine Warren said it wouldn't have been appropriate for them as they weren't members of the ministry. The Perrons stayed in the house until 1980, when eventually the hauntings started to go silent. This might be one of the few times a horror movie based on a true story had a happier ending than the real story. Love horror movies? Me too. Stick around at Top 5 Scary for more stuff every day. Let's keep on creeping on. Number 4. The Amityville Horror. Another haunted house story, and wouldn't you know it, another one attached to Ed and Lorraine Warren. If there was a haunted house in the Midwestern United States in the 1970s and they made a movie about it, well, by gum, those two names will come up a lot. They were very busy. The Amityville Horror has been made into a movie a few times, first in 1979 and again in 2005, if you can remember that terrible period when Hollywood was dredging up every single horror franchise and rebooting them terribly. Both movies are based on a real-life famous haunting, however, and while details vary between the films pretty wildly, let's see how they stack up against the original case. In 1973, a man named Ronald DeFeo slayed his family in a brutal crime, claiming that he had heard voices that had commanded him to do it, and there was some entity in the house. 13 months later, the Lutz family bought the house. The realtors had warned them about the house's grisly past, but it didn't bother them. You know how the housing market is. A friend of the family told them that it would be wise to have the house blessed, since there could still be evil inside the walls. After the family moved in, they described all sorts of paranormal wrongdoings going on. Green viscous slime coming up the staircases, voices speaking out to them, telling them to get out, flies all over the house, and the family even seeing wild things like specters. Now that's all pretty bad, but the film adaptations really take it up to the extreme. In the films, the Lutz family faces spirits directly, seeing ghosts. The father even gets possessed and attacks the family dog. Now, nothing this extreme happened in the actual haunting case, but there was a photo that was released that appears to show a ghostly boy walking across a staircase. But there's a lot of discussion as to whether or not it's legitimate, or whether or not anything involving the haunting was legitimate at all, as there are many who feel that it was faked by the Warrens and hyped up a little bit to try and make it a much more interesting story so they could sell books or movies. Well, real or not, it definitely worked, as the book was a smash hit and there have been dozens of movies since, meaning we're not leaving Amityville anytime soon. Number 3. The Exorcism. Now, The Exorcism is an iconic horror movie and legendary story adapted from a novel. Not many people know that the novel and the film were based on a real-life exorcism of a boy named Roland Doe, or so we think, as his real name has never been cleared up. Living in Maryland, Roland lived a quiet, sheltered life, relying on his aunt for company, a noted occultist, and fascinated with the spirit world. She gifted him a Ouija board at a young age. After his aunt passed, it wasn't long before the family home started to experience a series of strange paranormal events. Like it always does, it started a bit small, just objects moving around the house or water leaking from all the pipes in the house, but then eventually it started to ramp up. it seemed like Roland had become possessed. He started to fall mysteriously ill, and red scratches appeared all over the boy's body. The family was put in contact with the clergy, who suggested they needed an exorcist to help them. Now, unfortunately, although in the film, Reagan only needed one exorcism, albeit a brutally rough one, Roland wouldn't be nearly that lucky. Roland was exorcised round the clock for weeks and weeks. Now, he never turned green and vomited up pea soup, nor did he ever twist his head all the way around, but they did report that he would growl gutturally in a voice that wasn't his. He would speak Latin, and even threatened the priests by saying that Satan had taken control of his soul. On one occasion, during an extreme exorcism, he broke free of his restraints when he was tied to a mattress and managed to slash at one of the priests using the buckle, similar to Reagan attacking her exorcisers multiple times in the film. After weeks of battling, eventually like a miracle, Roland woke and said he saw a vision of Saint Michael and Satan battling for his soul, and after that, he was freed. None of the priests were slain like in the film, and luckily after this harrowing experience, Roland was able to live a quiet, normal life and tried his best to live under the radar, not wanting any more attention than he'd already had. After reading about it in a newspaper, author William Blatty was fascinated by the case and inspired to write about an exorcism of his own, which would then become The Exorcism, and then the movie was made, and well, the rest is pretty much history. Number 2. Annabelle. Another famous story from the Warrens' legacy. We knew we'd be seeing them again. Based around probably the most famous and recognizable haunted item in the Warrens' Museum of the Occult, Annabelle. The real Annabelle is a cursed Raggedy Ann doll that was one of the first cases the Warrens ever investigated. Now, the real Annabelle already looks pretty unsettling and isn't the kind of thing I would ever give to a child, but her Hollywood glow-up made her even more terrifying. The story of the film and the legend of the real Annabelle differ pretty greatly though. In the film, Annabelle is given off as a gift from a husband to his pregnant wife, whereas in reality, the Raggedy Ann doll was given to a nursing student, Donna, by her mother as a small gift. The film does feature Donna and her roommate Angie speaking to the Warrens at the beginning, describing their experiences with the doll. That's kind of where the two stories stop being the same and start differing greatly. The original story, Donna claims that the doll would move around their home, appearing in random places, occasionally having red stains on her no one could explain. She would complain that her and her roommate would wake up covered in scratches, again, no one could explain. They said they would find notes scrawled in red writing across the home, reading cryptic things like "Help us" or "Help Lou," the name of Donna's roommate's fiance. The most extreme thing any of them ever reported was that Donna's fiance claims one night while staying over, he felt something crawling on his leg, and when he looked to see what it was, he saw Annabelle on his leg and claims the doll leapt up at him. He woke up the next morning completely unsure if what he had experienced was real or not. Now from there, they contacted a medium to arrange a seance to see if they were dealing with something truly evil. From here, the Warrens were put in contact to help them and take Annabelle off their friends. While the real story is no doubt spine-chilling, the movie got a lot more dramatic, involving satanic cults, deaths, house fires, and a whole lot more. But still, I probably wouldn't want to spend any time near the real Annabelle, just in case. Number 1. A Nightmare on Elm Street. Wes Craven was a master of horror. I don't think it is completely fair to call him a visionary and an icon of the craft, giving us not just one, but two legendary classic horror movie franchises, A Nightmare on Elm Street and the satirical horror movie series Scream. Freddy Krueger is larger than life as a horror icon. He's incredibly popular, appearing in several of his own movies, even coming into some of Jason's movies, starring in a couple video games as a playable character in Mortal Kombat and Dead by Daylight. A horribly burned dream-invading ghoul, manifesting people's worst fear and attacking them in a place no one can help them and no one can believe them. He's terrifying, but by gosh do we love him. It's no wonder Freddy's had such scary staying power. But I bet you didn't know Wes Craven was inspired by a real-life horror story for Freddy. Don't worry, there's no real-life groundskeepers that were cast into a furnace, at least I think. Wes Craven was reading the LA Times one morning and he read an article that pierced him and stuck with him. It was about a refugee family that fled to the United States for the fear of their lives. The son of the family was plagued by nightmares and said that he was too afraid to sleep. When he finally found himself falling asleep in the middle of the night, he was screaming and passed away during a nightmare. This spoke to Wes Craven deeply, who sympathized that he was too afraid to sleep and no one would listen to his worries, and saddened at the idea of something that would attack someone while they were vulnerable and away from the protection of supervisors and guardians. From that tragic story, Freddy Krueger was born as a manifestation of this horrible concept that affected Wes Craven so deeply, trying to conjure up the most evil thing he could think of. Since then, Freddy's become a pop culture icon and is not without his legions of fans, but few know the true story behind the iconic slasher slasher. Number 5. You're Next. Hey, family dinners are always a bit awkward, aren't they? You know, trying to get the gravy passed to you, trying to avoid an argument with your uncle about your career, and trying to elude the vicious sickos that are hunting you and your family for sport. You're Next is a 2011 slasher directed by Adam Wingard, who also blessed us with Godzilla vs. Kong, one of the finest films ever made. Made on a humble $1 million budget, You're Next is a horror movie that brings it to the absolute basics. One house, one troubled family, and 3 very dangerous psychopaths. An estranged family is meeting for a reunion at their summer home in the rural Deep South, and newcomer to the family, Erin, is nervous to be introduced officially as her boyfriend's long-term partner. Now, tensions are high enough with the usual family drama before the first crossbow bolt pierces the window, as the family is being hunted by a relentless pack of bloodthirsty animal mask-wearing lunatics who seem to be doing this whole thing just for kicks. Watch the family fall apart under pressure, metaphorically and uncomfortably literally, as they're picked off one by one by their sick predators, until one of them starts to rise up unexpectedly against their tormentors. Now, if you were a fan of the Hotline Miami games, this is probably as close as you're ever going to get to a movie for that 80s splatter feel and all the animal mask-wearing lunatics. You're Next feels like a movie that got time-traveled from 1984 in the best way. It's a throwback to the golden age of B-horror movies. Wet, gross, stupid, and in the darkest ways, really funny. This movie's almost a dysfunctional family comedy, if you can call it that. It's sinister, sick, gruesome, and hilarious, has an absolutely great sense of style, really cool soundtrack, and I guarantee you the main song from the movie is gonna get stuck in your head for weeks afterwards. Definitely check You're Next out if you're looking for some fluffy horror fun. I've got a DVD at home if you want to borrow it. Now, hey ghouls and goblins, you already know that the best place for the scary video. Hey ghouls and goblins, you already know the best place for scary videos on the web is right here, but if somehow you didn't know that, always a good time to learn, so why don't you subscribe so you never miss a scare. Number 4. The Color Out of Space. When we think H.P. Lovecraft, we tend to think of giant squid monsters and incomprehensible madness. Well, this movie's got one of those in folds, and it's not the squid monster. The Color Out of Space is a 2019 horror movie directed by Richard Stanley, adapting the H.P. Lovecraft story of the exact same name, but modernizing it slightly, bringing it up to the 21st century. The story details a father moving his family to his late father's farm, escaping the bright lights and humdrum of city life, moving to his hometown of Arkham, the exceedingly cursed city from Lovecraft's writings. What should be a breath of fresh air and lovely times in the cottage turns to a nightmare when an asteroid falls to the farm, releasing with it a mysterious color that seeps into the farmland. A color out of space, if you will. It affects the minds of everyone around the farm, all the animals, and begins to seep into the water and drive everyone to incomprehensible madness. Nick Cage plays the patriarch of the Gardner family, and let me tell you, there could not possibly have been a better actor for the lead in a movie about slowly going mad. I mean, Nick Cage on his absolute best day already seems like he's about 2 screws short of absolute madness, so watching him in this is a treat. You spend the entire time wondering if the insanity is taking him over and consuming his brain, or if that's just how Nicolas Cage talks and he thinks he's doing a New England accent right now. Color Out of Space builds really slowly, leaving you on edge the entire time, and when the madness sets in, it sets in hard as you painfully watch the farmstead fall, desperate that maybe, just maybe, someone will pull through against the immeasurable horror of some entity beyond the cosmos. It captures Lovecraft's writing effortlessly and brings it to the modern age flawlessly, with all the blood and insanity you could hope for. Number 3. The Void. Our next entry on this list is The Void, a 2016 horror flick by Steven Kostanski, another Lovecraft horror movie. Your host has a little bit of a bias, and this one's Canadian made, so I have to include it based on that alone. It also totally rocks, so there is that. The Void is another flick that feels like it time traveled through the mid-80s, and maybe it's just my personal taste, but that is very much a good thing. The Void seems like the kind of thing John Carpenter would have slapped his name on. A small-town deputy has his night wildly disturbed when he finds someone suffering from violent injuries, and after taking him to the local hospital, finds himself trapped in the hospital with his ex-wife, a nurse, who's dealing with a crisis of her own, as the hospital is being overrun by an onslaught of mysterious injuries and madness. The two estranged lovers find themselves caught in a blood-soaked conflict between a sinister cult and some entity that appears able to revive the dead, albeit a bit twisted into horrifying monstrosities of flesh and bone. Now, if you're like me and you think The Thing is the greatest horror movie ever made, The Void feels like it could be its unofficial sequel. It's better than the actual sequel prequel to The Thing that they made. The special effects on the monsters are fantastic. If you're the kind of ghoul who loves puppets, prosthetics, and gallons worth of corn syrup blood, The Void has everything you are looking for in those 3 spades. And the plot is fun, and it has some good twists and turns, but let's be honest here. You're watching this one because it's got very gross monsters and really cool Lovecraft-inspired mythos of cults and a great god beyond the stars. You want my advice? Grab a friend or two, order the largest, greasiest pizza your local favorite spot has, grab a 2-liter of something carbonated, and have a great Friday night with this one. The Void to me is what a good horror movie should be. Gross, scary, a little stupid, and a ton of fun. Number 2, Hush. Okay, enough movies about incomprehensible horrors from beyond the stars. Let's reel it in a bit, and let's get back to some comprehensible horror. Home invasion. Lock those doors. Oh, sorry, I forgot to turn the volume up. Hush is a 2016 slasher home invasion movie coming to us from Blumhouse horror icon Mike Flanagan, director of a ton of amazing horror projects like Oculus, Dr. Sleep, Midnight Mass, The Haunting of shows, and Hush is no exception to that rule. A deaf and mute horror writer, that's why I did that before, who lives alone with her cat in the woods with a few isolated neighbors around her, becomes the unwilling target in the most dangerous game when a twisted hunter decides to make her his prey. After hunting her neighbor with a crossbow, he sets his sight on her next. When he learns that his next victim is deaf and mute, it seems like he finds himself thrilled at the possibility of a challenge. Now, Hush could have very easily just been your run-of-the-mill slasher home invasion movie, but it stands a lot taller than that with some incredibly fantastic sound design. I mean, I would hope so, given the premise of the movie and the name of the movie. The movie is so tense and saves its sounds really effectively for when it knows it's going to be the scariest. Makes it a lot scarier than the usual horror movies with a bombastic booming soundtrack and tons of scare hordes. It lets you really breathe in the tension. The cat and mouse game between the protagonist Maddie and the unnamed hunter feels deeply personal, putting you smack dab in the middle of it, chewing your fingernails the entire time as you hope for the best. Please check out Hush. Now, number 1, Green Room. Coming in at our number 1 spot is one of my favorite horror thrillers of all time, Green Room. An A24 horror classic before that was even a cool thing to describe your movie as. A failing Midwestern punk band are trying to hit it big while traveling the Northwest, barely scraping by on instant ramen and van life when they agree to play a gig at a rural roadhouse. Absolutely thrilled at the prospect of getting paid for once, the band takes the gig without asking any questions, only to swiftly discover upon arriving that they are in bad company. The bar is ran and owned by a skinhead gang who don't take kindly to them whatsoever. After the bassist witnesses a crime in the eponymous Green Room, the band is trapped by the gang who refuses to let them leave. Alive. From here, the movie turns into a sort of reverse home invasion as the band tries desperately to escape the clutches of the gang by any means necessary. Green Room is tense. You are going to feel like you are trapped in there with them. If you've ever survived a local DIY show basement, then the sights of Green Room will look pretty familiar to you. Setting a high-octane horror movie in such a hostile environment that you'll recognize makes it feel all the more real. You know, I've seen countless horror movies in haunted houses, but I can't name that many in a bar basement. Green Room is horror at some of its best, taking a concept I guarantee you haven't seen before and exploring it beyond just a simple bloody slasher. Fantastic camera work, dark humor, and a gripping plot with lovable characters and truly hateable villains. We are 3 paragraphs into me talking about this, and I haven't even dropped the biggest bomb, which is that the leader of the skinhead gang is played by Sir Patrick Stewart in one of his most unhinged roles ever since maybe American Dad. I'd say he steals this thing, but honestly everybody delivers. Anton Yelchin also delivers one of the best performances of his career as the band's weary, tortured bassist. Go into Green Room expecting a super tense, shockingly gory, but amazing horror movie if you can brave it. Just make sure you get a stamp on your wrist so you can leave. Number 5, The Lighthouse. From visionary director Robert Eggers comes The Lighthouse, a harrowing fable that teaches us the importance of respecting personal boundaries and respecting seabirds. Eggers is one of my favorite modern horror directors, whose work sits a cut above the most usual horror fare with The Witch, The Lighthouse, and The Northman, which isn't quite horror unless you're terrified of Norway. The Lighthouse is unlike any other scary movies you've seen. Actually, it's probably unlike most movies you've seen. It's kind of hard to define The Lighthouse under one genre. It's unsettling and definitely makes me feel all heebly-jeebly watching it, but it isn't horror in the traditional sense. There's no monsters or slashers, just 2 men, a lighthouse, a whole lot of seagulls, and enough cabin fever-induced madness to shake a lobster at. A rookie lighthouse keeper, played by Robert Pattinson, is assigned to keep a lighthouse on a small isolated island off the coast of New England, under the supervision of the island's crusty old master, Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson are some of the best working actors out there right now, and the 2 of these titans absolutely show up for this, carrying this 2-headed character piece on their backs and speaking in some of the most hilariously memorable accents ever put to film. Seriously, Willem Dafoe's old nautical piratical accent in this thing needs to be taught in acting schools. I would do an impression, but I won't do it justice. The film is shot beautifully, the whole thing seeming like a mix between a bad dream and an avant-garde theater production, leaving you asking the entire time if anything you're seeing can be trusted, if any of it's even happening, or if the whole thing is all just one twisted nightmare between two very lonely, isolated men. Now, I can't say for sure if they went nuts because they weren't subscribed to Top 5 Scary, but I'm willing to bet that a little bit of entertainment from the best scary videos channel on the web might have helped some of that madness. So subscribe, maybe. Number 4, Annihilation. I've talked a bit about Annihilation before on this channel, and I will continue to do so until Annihilation gets the respect it deserves. That's my mission. I've never forgiven the movie-going populace for not seeing this one in theaters. Annihilation came to us from director and writer Alex Garland, who also gave us Ex Machina, a fantastic movie about having a crush on a robot. Annihilation is a cosmic horror story detailing the effects of after an asteroid crashes to Earth and a mysterious alien presence known as the Shimmer begins to manifest across a quarantine zone in a forest outside an army base. Everything the Shimmer touches starts to blend together. Biological life merging, double helixes swirling in a big cosmic gumbo. The film is hauntingly beautiful as it is terrifying. Our protagonist Lena, played by Natalie Portman, is a US Army veteran who lost her husband in an unrelated combat mission. One day he shows up on her doorstep, convulsing violently, leading Lena towards the Shimmer. Learning her husband was involved, she ventures forward with a group of fellow researchers and soldiers to uncover what lies at the heart of the Shimmer, what's causing it, and if it can be stopped. The film is a visual treat with its lush vistas and uniquely terrifying monster designs. I've talked about Annihilation Bear before, and I will take any opportunity to talk about Annihilation Bear. I love Annihilation Bear. Slap a photo of him back there for me. Annihilation is the perfect kind of horror movie, simultaneously exploring complex themes of depression, grief, humanity's inherent nature and propensity towards self-destructive behavior, but it also asks even bigger questions like, wouldn't it be really yucky if a bear had a human skull inside its head that screamed like a dying human while it was roaring? Get you a horror movie that can do both, okay? Number 3, Jacob's Ladder. While the first 2 entries on our list were pretty recent and well received, I want to throw it back a couple decades for our next entry and highlight a cult classic that could always use a little bit more love. Jacob's Ladder details the story of Jacob Singer, a Vietnam veteran who 4 years later, after returning home from the war, struggles to readjust to his normal life. Not helping matters much, no doubt, is the fact that Jacob keeps seeing horrifying monstrosities surrounding him every day. It seems as if since he's come home, nothing has ever been the same. The film shows us life through Jacob's tormented eyes. As he tries to navigate through healing and overcoming his personal demons, he is constantly haunted by real-life demons that seem to have a very vested interest in him. Matters only serve to get a lot more confusing when Jacob learns that other members of his platoon, back from his army days, have all been suffering similar things, reporting seeing the same monsters and being haunted. Desperate to find the truth, Jacob seeks out the cause of what's happening to him and his old friends, and ends up descending down a path of madness, learning things no man ever should. Worth noting is just how influential Jacob's Ladder is, serving as one of the direct inspirations for the legendary Silent Hill series of games, with Silent Hill 2 in particular taking major inspiration from the film's plotline, monsters, twists, right down to the protagonists even wearing the exact same outfit as a little homage. Jacob's Ladder is a little older than some of the other entries on this list. It is absolutely worth a watch and still worth your time. A great performance out of Tim Robbins and one of the most wild twist-ending horror movies ever had. A bunch have tried to copy this. I'm sure you've seen a million hack writers copy it, but no one did it as cool as when Jacob's Ladder did it, so there. And actually thinking about it, I shouldn't even mention a twist, so there was no twist. Everything in Jacob's Ladder happens very literally. Go into it knowing that, okay? Number 2, Sinister. Moving. It's always stressful, isn't it? It's a huge pain. Well, Sinister is a 2012 horror film about an everyday family moving houses and all the trials and tribulations that come with that, like having to update your postal code on your information, unpacking your stuff and figuring out where all your art books are gonna go, and finding out that you moved into a house where a series of grisly rituals happened, sacrificing the previous family who lived here, and it's all been filmed and kept in a box upstairs in the attic. You know, just regular stuff the kids go through all the time. A struggling true crime novelist is trying to chase his glory days and intentionally moves into a house he knows where ghastly deaths took place in order to get close to the story so he can better research it and write a bestseller. He discovers a box in the attic full of film of all of the crimes and becomes obsessed with uncovering and exposing what happened, mostly so he can make a quick buck and get himself back on top again and make the late night circuit. As his obsession grows, it starts to affect his family and children in concerning ways, as everyone in the family starts acting acting stranger, having visions, hallucinations, and psychotic episodes, leaving you wondering if there is something much deeper going on in this house beyond a floundering author chasing a bestseller. Now, if you haven't seen this one, it's definitely worth going into this one as blind as you possibly can, because the twists and turns totally make this one. I spent the entire runtime of this propped up on the edge of the couch, my heart pounding, hoping that everything would turn out to be totally okay, even though I knew better. It's a horror movie, things never go great. The movie's got a stellar sense of dread that refuses to let go once it starts, and only lets you breathe out once the credits roll, and even then, not for very long. Fantastic performances across the board, but a special shout out goes to Ethan Hawke, who makes this thing. Number 1, Hereditary. Now, there are a ton of movies that could easily have taken the number 1 spot here, and I thought pretty hard about making The Shining number 1, since, you know, it's kind of a classic, but I figured a lot of people have talked about The Shining, and then I remembered the experience of seeing Hereditary in a movie theater, and how it was the only time in my life I've ever seriously thought about leaving a movie theater because I thought I was gonna throw up on the seats. I was so scared and uncomfortable. Hereditary is a 2018 horror movie from visionary Ari Aster, who also gave us the psychological horror movie masterpiece Midsommar, so Aster really just bangs out the hits. Hereditary is about as peak A24 horror movie as it gets. One of those ones where the monster is really a metaphor for generational trauma and all that. After the grand matriarch of a Midwestern family passes away, her daughter and grandkids begin to uncover the cryptic and terrifying truth behind their ancestry, trying desperately to escape the sinister legacy they've inadvertently inherited. This movie is terrifying in the worst of ways. It's not just jump scares or tons of blood. No. This is elevated horror. This is not your usual horror story. It really zeroes in on the way too close to home horror of watching a family break apart. It is gut-wrenchingly painful to watch, preying on really specific kind of fears. It's gonna get its hooks in you and have your teeth grinding for the full 2 hours runtime and for ages afterwards. If you've seen this, I dare you to look at a pigeon, a stop sign, cheese wire, or a treehouse ever the same after this movie. And staggering performances. Toni Collette goes for absolute gold and delivers one of the best performances I've ever seen in a horror movie, full stop. She needs an Oscar for most upsetting crying I have ever heard in a film, which is a category she would have no competition in. Hereditary might not be the goriest film or even the scariest movie I've ever seen or most upsetting. There's a bunch of Takashi Miike or Park Chan-wook films that would probably take that. But Hereditary is definitely one of the most viscerally scary movies I've ever seen. The kind that just sits in your gut and makes you think about it all day, like you were living through an actual nightmare. Watch only if you're truly brave. I know I made it sound absolutely horrible, but it is a great movie. Just don't be surprised if you don't sleep that night. Number 5, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. A good tagline can really sell your movie, you know? In space, no one can hear you scream. You'll believe a man can fly. Absolute classics. In my opinion, there's few that go harder than the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre's bold proclamation and threat: who will survive and what will be left of them. The original Texas Chainsaw is a legend of horror, practically kickstarting slasher movies altogether. While there's a whole other discussion to be had about what could be considered the first true slasher movie, there's no denying that Chainsaw wrote the rulebook. Hulking monsters in a mask, a screaming final girl, Texas Chainsaw was writing the rules years before Michael Myers was chasing Jamie Lee. Texas Chainsaw is the classic slasher premise. A group of hapless young fools all fall victim to the kind of horrors that only exist in our worst nightmares. The Sawyer clan are a family of deranged hillbillies living in rural Texas who believe in using every part of the meat they hunt for their chili. They're not really interested in beef though. It's almost got a bit of a misleading name. You hear Texas Chainsaw Massacre and you imagine a sea of corn syrup, blood, and special effects that'll leave you needing a barf bag. And hey, don't worry. The stream of sequels and remakes that followed definitely do get there. The 2006 one is maybe one of the grossest movies I've ever seen. But the original is a much better made movie than any of that. It's honestly not nearly as gory as the title would have you believe, and would probably be considered tame by modern standards. I'd go so far as to say it's a masterpiece. Few movies capture the feeling of true insanity the way this one does. The screaming, the hooting, the hollering, being hunted by the Sawyers is the kind of fear that feels like it belongs in an evidence locker, not in a theater. It says something that in a study using Texas Chainsaw as a litmus test for audience perceptions of horror movies, the survey came back saying that the scariest thing in the entire movie was not the monsters or the chainsaws, but just the screams of the victims. Hey, enjoying what we do? We'd love if you toss a subscribe our way for more scary content every single day. Number 4. Sinister. Now, I normally don't like to bring science into a discussion about horror movies or about ghosts, but a recent 2020 study involving attaching heart monitors to viewers and making them watch horror movies while researchers tracked their heart rates apparently revealed Sinister to be the scariest movie of all time. Medically speaking, proof is in the pudding, or the heart rate. To be completely honest, I definitely see where they're coming from. I didn't need any sort of medical equipment to tell you I found Sinister downright terrifying. Sinister at first seems like it's going to be a pretty run-of-the-mill, corny ghost house movie, but after about 15 minutes my worries were put to bed and instead replaced by nightmares. A struggling true crime writer, played by a personal favorite, Mr. Ethan Hawke, moves into a house knowingly that was host to a series of grisly, horrifying rituals to some dark god. Hey, in this economy, you gotta take whatever deals you can. He moves in hoping that getting close to the scene of the crime will inspire his writings, and it sort of does, in a way, because he finds a series of films in the attic, all showcasing the brutal things that have happened in his new home. And it does not take long before our would-be writer is obsessing over his home movie collection, letting it affect his work, his family, and his brain. Another great one where you're never sure how supernatural things are until you're extremely sure. Ethan Hawke rides the line well between kind of being dumb enough that you sort of think he deserves what's coming to him, but also sympathetic enough that you don't want to see him get grabbed anytime soon. A fantastic score sets the tone, leaving you always just a little anxious and your heart never quite slowing down enough to breathe. The scenes of the home movies in question are actually some of the scariest things I think I've ever seen in a Hollywood flick, and definitely deserve special mention, as they're probably the highlight of the film. Disturbingly real enough to seem like they might actually have happened, and restrained enough as well that it never dwells on the violence too much, letting your imagination fill in all the horrible, horrible blanks. Number 3. Saw. Now, Saw is hardly underrated or some hidden gem. They made 9 of them. I think everyone knows about Jigsaw and his sick little games by now, but that doesn't stop the original 2004 film from being one of my go-to Halloween movies every year. Equal parts detective thriller and equal parts stomach-churningly terrifying, there's a simple elegance to the first Saw. Before the storyline became so convoluted you needed a historian to help you navigate the timeline and secret double crosses, backstabs, betrayals, and secret jigsaws, there was just 2 men, a freaky little puppet, one rancid bathroom, and a saw. The movies get ridiculous very, very fast, with Jigsaw's level of control varying from superhuman levels of planning to straight up bad man, bad guy in some of the sequels, and the first is like that too, but there's something so terrifyingly real about the first one, you know? It feels like the worst intrusive thought you could ever have. Imagine someone had been stalking you, making a list of your wrongdoings, and wanted to test if you truly appreciated your life, if you'd be willing to fight for it. As a kid, even though I knew he was a fictional character played by a guy who's actually pretty nice in real life, I was terrified that one day I would wake up chained to a radiator, hear that hiss and crackle of the TV static, and see that evil little puppet grinning up at me. The first movie cuts all the fat, pun intended, and gets in good as you watch Jigsaw's 2 victims descend to madness at a breakneck pace when they realizes the consequences are more dire than they could have ever assumed, and there isn't a way for either of these men to leave in one piece. It's gross, it's lowbrow, it is absolutely edge of your seat horrifying. I think the first one has one of the most off-putting atmospheres I've ever seen in a horror movie. Every inch of that set just looks like it was abhorrently rancid. It looks like it's not even safe to be breathing in there. It just feels jagged and sticky, you know? Like you gotta take a shower after watching. Number 2, Hereditary. Now, it would not be a scariest horror movie list without Hereditary. Hereditary, to date, is the only movie I thought, hey, I might have to walk out of this because I genuinely don't think I can take what's happening. Now, the more likely scenario is that I'm a massive wimp, but the other very likely possibility is that this movie is just gut-wrenchingly terrifying. Hereditary tells us the story of a doomed family seeking to uncover and hopefully break the generational curse placed on them as a gift from their passing matriarch, who seems to have been up to some shadier business than anyone could have known. After a heinously tragic accident, the family finds themselves descending into a web of madness, distrust, and fear. Hereditary is probably one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, and there's barely so much as a jump scare. There's very little in the ways of ghouls, goblins, or ghosts in this one, just itchy fear. That fear of being unable to protect your family, watching it all fall apart, and the age-old fear of wondering if perhaps you've got some sort of ancient, unavoidable satanic curse placed on you and your family. regular stuff. The movie builds agonizingly slowly, leaving you waiting and wondering the entire time if there really is anything supernatural happening or if you're just driving yourself mad wondering while you watch. If you like a slower burn kind of horror movie, then Hereditary is perfect for you. It's full of the kind of nightmarish imagery that isn't leaving you anytime soon, and that's where it scares best, showing you something for just a second or two that you would never want to see in your life, ever, not dwelling on it too long, but just enough to stick in your head like a bad dream, and then appear in your bad dreams every night thereafter. Number 1, Halloween. Okay guys, I'm gonna come clean, I'm gonna be honest. This whole channel is all just a big ruse for me to talk about the Halloween movies. All the other videos are nothing more than a facade for my real goal, to talk about Michael Myers and his sometime sister Laurie Strode. The Megalodon? Ghosts? Aliens? All my lesser muses. Compared to some other entries on this list, or even its many sequels, the original Halloween is downright tame in terms of blood and gore. In fact, there's actually barely any blood and no gore. A stark contrast to Rob Zombie and David Gordon Green's approach to the boogeyman. The original really focuses on the cat and mouse game between the Shape and his obsession, Laurie Strode. Most horror movie protagonists, usually the protagonists, have condemned themselves to some karmic fate. Like I mentioned, the guy from Sinister chose to watch all those scary tapes. The counselors who venture to Camp Crystal Lake every year, despite the warnings, it makes us, the audience, not really feel bad for what's about to happen to them because we know they sealed their doom. But Laurie Strode is a completely innocent bystander to all of it, who just has the unfortunate stroke of bad luck of just happening to be the wrong person standing in the wrong place when Michael sets his eyes on her, spurring a 4-decade-long obsession. That terrifying implication that it could happen to anyone, that the boogeyman could be behind you at any time, making you his next victim solely because you were in the way. Some horror movies from the 70s and 80s start to show their age, but masterful film work like Halloween doesn't. The way the camera lingers on Michael with that haunting synth soundtrack still riles me up to this day. That tension in the air when Michael starts to go after Laurie's friends, first disguising himself in that ghost sheet. Hey. Other movies always walk the line with what Michael is, with some of them offering detailed backstories. Sometimes he's born out of a dark cult, sometimes he had a troubled childhood and no one but Rob Zombie understood him. But in the original, we get the most concise, simple, and effective explanation. He's evil. He's just pure evil behind those black eyes, and that is the scariest answer imaginable.
Number 5, The Blair Witch Project. I remember seeing this when I was like 10, and I'm not gonna lie, it kind of scared the shit out of me. It still does. It tripped me out because like back then my parents were like, oh, don't worry honey, this is made up, after like every scary movie we watched. But this time they were like, was that real? You know, my dad just sat there quiet thinking. I was scared. Because the whole production apparently did such an amazing job from top to tail of its release, making the audience still feel like it really happened. The Blair Witch Project is probably the most famous found footage movie ever made. The campaign tactic was that the viewers were told through missing persons posters and that the characters were missing while researching in the woods for this mythical Blair Witch. Their IMDb page even listed the actors as missing and presumed deceased in the first year of the film's release. Even the film's website contained actors posing as investigators giving testimonies about their evidence. They even shared childhood photos of the 3 leads to add a sense of realism. By August 1999, the website had received 160 million hits and the movie went from a flop at midnight to the top worldwide. During screenings, the filmmakers made advertising efforts to promote the events in the film as factual, including the distribution of flyers at all of the film festivals such as Sundance and Cannes, asking viewers to come forward with any information about the missing students. All the actors making their feature film debuts as well were described as missing and presumed dead. The actors' parents even started receiving condolence calls and sympathy letters. The actors got to witness the movie blow up, but they weren't even invited to the screenings due to the publicity. Imagine not being able to go see your own premiere, or even really celebrate your huge role in this huge successful movie. It's kind of sad for the actors, don't you think? I think it is. Number 4, The Bay. Of course, if you like what we do here on Top 5 Scary, throw us a thumbs up down below or comment which one of these real-ish movies scared you the most. The Bay is a 2012 American mockumentary horror film directed by Barry Levinson and written by Michael Wallach. The movie's basically about a small town getting infected with a contaminated water source that 2 oceanographers discovered in the bay without saying anything. After investigating fish being eaten from the inside out, they realize that the culprit is this tongue-eating louse creature that looks like the bugs from like Starship Troopers. Yeah, really scary. The movie came out as a result of a documentary Levinson was asked to produce about real problems facing the Chesapeake Bay. Although Levinson chose to abandon the documentary upon learning that it was already being covered by a huge news network organization. Levinson instead decided to use all that research to produce this horror film, which he hoped would shed light on the issues facing Chesapeake Bay. As such, when promoting the film, he noted that more than 80% of the film is real and actually factual information. Also, 80% is so real that it had to wait to be released and cleared first. What? Yeah, this was like a real issue, hence the confusion around the found footage. Apparently this nuclear disaster monster giant isopod in the bay aren't real, but the small isopods filmed are very real. You see a tight shot of the isopod, Levinson said. That's not CGI, that's real. We just pulled that out of the Atlantic Ocean. The isopods do this really gruesome thing, which the bay does a great example of, is that they eat the fish from inside out. All that stuff is actually factual. A leaking nuclear reactor actually does have a runoff heading towards the Chesapeake Bay. Its quantities aren't great, but the fact that it's actually happening seems scary enough. The chicken farm runoff stuff is actually factual too. At the end of the day, yes, it's a movie, not a documentary, but it's infused with a lot of things that are really real. I think it adds to the nature of the piece, end quote. Hey, spoken like a true artist. And that's why the film has gotten so many great reviews. Give it a watch, very spooky, very well done. Number 3, the Poughkeepsie Tapes. Writer-director fam jam duo John Eric and Drew Dowdle are best known for their sinister yet impeccable found footage movies. Yeah, it's pretty gory and actually had to wait 10 years before being released due to the graphic footage on it. It's rumored that it was held for 10 years due to its contents and disturbing atmosphere, referring to it as a banned movie. It's likely that MGM felt audiences weren't really ready to see such graphic content. In an abandoned house in Poughkeepsie, New York, murder investigators uncover hundreds of tapes showing decades of a deranged killer's work. And in an all too realistic found footage mockumentary, the moments showing the killer POV are things of nightmares. I'm not gonna lie, this is like the goriest movie on our list today. But with scary movies, sometimes comes a little gore, you know? The Poughkeepsie Tapes plays out as a faux documentary following the discovery of a very large collection of VHS tapes created by said deranged psychopath, and the investigations that follow. The documentary is well shot and played out in a believable manner. Sometimes the acting is a little, yeah, this is really fake. And then sometimes it's like, okay, I'm gonna look up if that guy's a real cop. The feel of this movie is gore, gore, gore. If you're into like Saw type stuff and multiple victims and lots of popcorn syrup, this one's definitely for you. These tapes are only fictional, but there's a small catch. According to Marist College, the Poughkeepsie Tapes may be based on an actual event. A killer named Kendall Francois killed 8 to 10 people in Poughkeepsie in the late 90s, but didn't videotape the murders. There's heavy debate in the film industry on which movies are depicting actual cases similar to actual reports, and acts that are totally staged and made up. Number 2, The Quiet Ones. The Quiet Ones is a 2014 British supernatural horror film directed by John Pogue, based on a very real 1972 parapsychology experience called The Philip Experiment, conducted in Toronto. It stars Jared Harris as a U of T professor attempting to prove that poltergeists are actually real manifestations of the human psyche and not actually supernatural beings. The movie is very scary, no doubt about it. Jared Harris is amazing, as always, but the real story behind it is actually way more terrifying. The professors of mathematics, science, and psychology created a fictitious character through an attempt to communicate with said fictitious entity through a controlled seance. It was the real deal. The character created and agreed upon was named Philip during the test. His fictional backstory coincided with real historic events and places, but with multiple contradictions and errors. They said he was born in 1624 in England, had an early military career, knighted by 16, in the English Civil War, and eventually dying at the age of 30. The group was seated around a table via a lecture, with initial seances yielding no contact, no communication, and no phenomenon. The professors then dimmed the lights, fully leaned into the seance, changing the environment. Participants and students then began feeling a presence. Lots of table vibrations, breezes, unexplained voices, and sounds which matched responses to Philip's life. Audio and video and witness accounts documented the paranormal event, but Philip never actually appeared. yo, this actually happened, like down the street from us. This is terrifying. And number 1, Ghostwatch 1992. First broadcast on BBC One Halloween night 1992. Written by Stephen Volk and directed by Leslie Manning, the drama was produced for an actual BBC anthology series. Despite having been recorded only weeks in advance, the narrative was presented as a live television broadcast. During and following its first and only UK television broadcast, the show resulted in an estimated 1 million separate phone calls to the BBC that night, dealing with a mixture of complaints and praise for the program's bizarre release. Yeah, Ghostwatch has never been repeated on UK television. It's been replayed on stations such as the Canadian channel Scream for Halloween once in 2004, and the Belgian channel Canvas in 2008. The hour-and-a-half event was shot documentary style and appeared as part of the BBC. It involved actual BBC reporters performing a live on-air investigation of a so-called haunted house in London in which demonic poltergeists activity was taking place. Through found footage and interviews with family living there, they discovered the existence of a violent ghost nicknamed Pipes, a nickname from their kids. Footage actually showed the police arriving at Foxhill Drive, and the spirit even dragged a BBC host behind a door. Yeah, that is horrifying. Imagine watching your weekly hosts on like a reliable television network that's censored and archived, and then all of a sudden the host just gets yanked up the wall by a supposed demon live on TV. Number 5, Phoenix Forgotten. Phoenix Forgotten is a 2017 American found footage sci-fi horror directed by Justin Barber in his directorial debut and written by him and T.S. Nolan. Produced by Ridley Scott, the Ridley Scott. The film tells the story of the disappearance of 3 teenagers who set out to find the source of a widely reported 1997 UFO phenomenon known famously as, you guessed it, the Phoenix Lights. We all remember this, don't we? Okay, now the plot. Sophie Bishop and her boyfriend visit Sophie's parents' place in Phoenix, Arizona on the 20th anniversary of her brother's disappearance. In 1997, the family all witnessed the Phoenix Lights during Sophie's 6th birthday, which was, drumroll please, recorded. Several strange lights appear in a formation over the city before being chased by fighter jets. The family is convinced that they have witnessed UFOs via the old recordings, and Sophie now begins to dig a little bit deeper. In the tapes, Sophie's brother Josh begins investigating the Phoenix Lights with the help of his friends Ashley and Mark. Sophie interviews multiple parties regarding the trio's disappearance and the sightings in '97, only to find the group's abandoned car and a camera and one single tape. Sophie views the tape, obviously, showing the beginning of the group's epic journey to find out what caused the Phoenix Lights. We then see what eventually ensues of the poor trio in a horror movie about aliens. Yeah, shocker, right? Or who knows, maybe it has a happy ending. I like this movie a lot for obvious reasons, but it's like really fun, and I like the dated feel with the tapes, you know? As always, dudes, if you like what we do here at Top 5 Scary, throw us a thumbs up down below or even leave us a comment, you know? Number 4, Antrum. Antrum is supposed to be the deadliest movie ever made, and that's what it claims. It's like a fever dream, this movie. Again, not real, but supposedly real. You know? It's a movie. Antrum is proudly a 2018 Canadian horror film. Woo! Go Canada. Written and directed by David Amito and Michael Lacini, the film is divided into 2 parts, an opening and a closing narrative in the form of a mockumentary and a feature film. The mockumentary loosely tells the story of Antrum, a movie released in the late 70s that supposedly had effects on those who watched it. The bulk of the movie then is just kinda moment to moment what kinda happened. Antrum was developed by Amito and Lacini during the development of a separate project in which they were brainstorming scenarios that scared them. Their central idea would later become the basis of Antrum. This idea and concept of what it would be like to watch a supposed, quote, real cursed film. The filmmakers felt like it would make a great horror film, which it does. For the film's occult aspects, the writers studied multiple historical depictions of demons and the devil. It stars Nicole Tompkins and child actor Rowan Smith. Antrum made its world premiere at the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival in October 2018 and was nominated for several awards festival to festival. Uncorked Entertainment acquired North American distribution rights, releasing it on video on demand and pretty well all streaming services since like 2019. It received great reviews who praised its uncomfortable atmosphere, its uncomfortable acting, and creativity. Yeah, they kind of nailed it with this one. It's so 70s. Like, it feels like, again, a fevered night terror. Number 3. As Above, So Below. As Above, So Below is a 2014 American horror film written and directed by John Eric Dowdle and co-written by his brother Drew. The title refers to the popular paraphrase of the second verse of the Emerald Tablet. The film is presented to the audience as found footage, following a documentary's crew's experience exploring the catacombs of Paris. The film was produced by Legendary Pictures and distributed by Universal. The film received negative reviews from critics but grossed more than $40 million with a huge profit from only a $5 million budget. The plot. Scarlett Marlowe is a scholar continuing her past father's research for the Philosopher's Stone. Scarlett travels to Paris with 2 friends, and using codes from her research, they solve a riddle leading them with coordinates to the catacombs of Paris. They sneak underground and the group wanders the caves. They encounter cultists, ghosts, visions, you name it. They find a Templar, Assassin's Creed looking tomb and see and read some pretty jarring stuff. Statues in the walls come to life, and it goes all Indiana Jones but like scary. The car scene? Like, yeah, what's that about? That's horrifying and downright disturbing. Dude, this movie is gonna leave you gasping for air, literally. But I really liked this movie. It's shot GoPro style, and I love that humid, dingy cave stuff. Look one way in the dark and then the other way. Yeah, I'm just sweating thinking about that scene. Number 2. The Taking of Deborah Logan. It's one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, I'm not gonna lie. This movie is horrifying. If you're down for like old witchy ghost lady vibes on a Friday night, and you like jump scares, we got a winner, folks. A 2014 gem. This American found footage supernatural horror film is a first for the director Adam Robidoux, who co-wrote the screenplay. Set in Virginia, it tells the story of a documentary crew making a film about Alzheimer's patients who uncover something sinister while documenting one woman. The film was released right around Halloween time, and you can still catch this on like every streaming service. A team of students who want to create a documentary about Deborah Logan, an elderly woman who has Alzheimer's, films and records her daily life. Then Deb starts to act a little bizarre. They notice that her actions defy normal explanations and express something a little bit more supernatural. Things escalate after they record an audio of Deborah talking about sacrifices and snakes. Oh yeah, like real witchy old lady vibes, I'm telling you. After some talk about an ancient ritual that makes people immortal, some dark cultist kind of stuff, and voila, Deb goes on a spree and tries to kidnap them all. They find out that she has quite the sinister history and that maybe she's not a really good fit for the star of a documentary, more like the star of an exorcism. Yeah, like that kind of stuff, you know? GoPro, night visions, old lady witchy standing in dark corners, good old-fashioned thrillers, you know? Good for the whole family, right before bedtime, in the dark. And the number 1 spot, of course, is The Visit. This movie's kind of like the last movie, with all the witchy vibes, but like way more subtle and way more terrifying. Yeah, I don't like when there's like creepy shit just running around in the background shots, right? Like, that's what scares me the most, the background shots. The Visit is a 2015 American found footage comedy horror film written, produced, and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. The film centers around 2 young siblings, teenager Becca and her kid brother Tyler, who live with their mother, who's had a pretty gruesome past herself. After finding their grandchildren online and wanting to meet them, the kids' grandparents invite them to spend a week at their farmhouse. Aw, how nice. Like a little Hansel and Gretel type stuff. Exactly. The film was released by Universal Pictures and it grossed about $100 million worldwide, against only a $5 million production budget, so yeah, this one killed it. Good job, guys. But it got mixed reviews though. I don't really know why. This movie's like really scary and well done. The plot. The kiddies are getting ready for a 5-day overnighter at the grandparents while their mother Loretta goes on a cruise as a much needed break. Loretta reveals that she has not spoken to her parents for like 15 years. The teens plan to record a documentary film about their visit using a camcorder. It's shot kind of GoPro style with some classic camera falls on the floor, what's in the background type fun. I'm not going to spoil anything in this movie, but if you like screaming things, crawling around all in the middle of the night, yeah, then this movie's definitely worth a watch. Check it out.
Number 5, Fresh. I decided to start this list off light, so obviously a movie about a human meat business. Fresh. The movie opens up to Noah on a date with a seriously insufferable man, like the thin scarf and everything. Noah later meets a guy at a grocery store, Steve, and they hit it off immediately. Ironically, there's actually a fresh meat sign hanging right over the scene, which, you know, it's not funny, but it kind of is. Anyway, the two end up going on a date where the pair get to know about each other. Family, friends, connections, people who would go searching for her, you know, Date topics. The pair strike up a fast and intense romance, and in just a couple of days, Steve invites Noah on a vacation to a surprise location. Noah hesitantly agrees, and they leave. Noah only tells her close friend that she's going, but Noah doesn't even have an address to give her because, hey, it's a surprise. Steve and Noah drive for hours. Noah notices how far they're going, but doesn't mention any discomfort. In fact, she even gets an address to where they're going, which she tells her friend. Steve tells her that they're going to stop at his house for the night and finish the drive in the morning. They arrive at Steve's desolate modern house, where Steve pours Noah a drink. Noah asks for the Wi-Fi, saying there's still no service, and Steve answers, "It must have gone out again." What? That wasn't the question, sir. He asks Noah to guess the flavors of her drink, which we all know is to get her to drink more of the spiked drink, and she ends up passing out. She wakes up in a large room, chained to a bed on the floor. Steve explains to her that his job is to kidnap women, do surgery on them to remove pieces of their flesh, and then to sell the meat to paying customers. Obviously, the lives of the women are then ended, and they slowly dwindle away into nothingness. Noah is able to speak to another woman that is there and discusses how long they've been there. But it's also revealed that Steve has an affinity for Noah, much like another woman who had written secret notes in magazines provided by Steve. Steve takes her out of her room for specially prepared meals which contained, you guessed it, human flesh. Back in the city, Noah's friend begins investigating her disappearance, eventually stumbling upon Steve's home in the city. There it is found out that he has a wife, who's missing a leg, who helps him with the business. Noah is able to build trust between her and Steve, and eventually he lets his guard down enough for her to make a move towards escaping. She ends up biting off his before running out onto the property. Noah's friend is able to find the house, and Steve's wife begins to hunt Noah down, but is unsuccessful. Steve and his wife end up passing, and Noah frees herself and the other girl there. God, I'm never going on a first date again. Number 4, Climax. This is by far one of the strangest yet most captivating movies I have ever had the pleasure to watch. It follows a dance group in France who are having a rehearsal and party before a performance. But about 30 minutes into the movie, everyone begins acting strange, and it's revealed that somebody spiked the punch with LSD. The movie opens with a myriad of interviews, introducing many, many characters and their reason for dancing. Then the movie shows the rehearsal and party, and then people started to realize that they were all acting weird, like tripping weird. I mean, people reacted as expected. Some people attempted to leave, only to find out the doors were locked. Some people began to have fun, while others were freaking out. Chaos seriously ensues. People are crying and screaming, amidst others who were dancing and enjoying their time profusely. One girl is set on fire. A young person whose mother danced there locked themselves in a bathroom and got electrocuted. Relationships began and ended, while others began to sleep with each other. Even, I'm not gonna say it directly, but a brother and a sister were in this movie. The group begins to turn on each other, accusing people of spiking the punch, but no one is ever able to come to a conclusion. Their attention spans aren't very long. The movie continues to pan around the building, showing the interactions everyone is having with themselves, the people around them, and the new hidden world that only they can see. Eventually, the group came down and saw that it was morning. They also found the previously locked door unlocked. The entire film is filled to the brim with amazing camera shots, acting, and dance sequences. It is truly a piece of artwork. Disturbing artwork, but artwork. The film's very last scene is a girl dropping liquid LSD into her eye. I'm not going to tell you who it is because the mystery of not knowing who it is creates such amazing suspense as you watch the movie. Number 3, Troll 2. Okay. I couldn't help myself. I had to add this movie in. Although it's not disturbing in the traditional horror sense, the acting, effects, and dialogue are surely enough to leave a viewer unsettled and confused. It has time control, teleportation, magic, an erotic popcorn scene, and as my mother put it, the whole movie seems as though it was directed by a 5-year-old and written by a 4-year-old. Troll 2 was made in 1990, but it seems like it was made in the 60s. I have never watched a horror movie that elicited such frustration yet amazement into my very core. The movie follows a family who decide to take an exchange vacation to Nilbog, a small desolate town. Upon arriving, the family realizes that its residents aren't what they first seemed to be. Yes, they did seem to be inhuman to the viewer, but somehow the family was blissfully unaware. The son, Joshua, keeps seeing his recently deceased grandfather, who everybody constantly calls Grandpa Seth. Yes, everyone. Grandpa Seth loves to tell Joshua stories of goblins. The sister I honestly don't remember her name, is in a, I don't know if I can call it a relationship with a boy. She's upset that the boy has friends, and she also mentions that her family hates him. But 2 seconds later, she invites him to go on their vacation, saying that her family would be fine with it. I know, it doesn't make sense. The boyfriend decides to take an RV with all of his friends to Nilbog, meeting the family there. In the car, a weird dream sequence occurs. Josh sees Grandpa Seth on the side of the road, and for some reason, his parents stop the car and allow him to run up to the man. It is then revealed that the man is just a random decrepit man, and only Joshua saw him as Grandpa Seth. And the family gently ask him to return to the car. No sense of concern whatsoever for their young child who is running up to a strange man on the side of the highway. Upon arriving in Nilbog, the family is greeted by the owners of the house they will be staying in, and oh my god. I don't even know how to explain the interaction besides, no, I actually have no words. They enter the house and there is a feast laid out for them, but Joshua's Grandpa Seth appears outside a window and tells him that he can't let his family eat the food, which is covered in a green oozing liquid. So Grandpa Seth freezes time, and Joshua comes up with a great idea to stop his family from eating the food. He pees on the table. Yes. That was actually the only thing he could come up with to prevent his family from eating, while he was frozen in time, peeing on the table. And no, nobody questions how he seemingly teleported from the window to standing on top of the table. Instead, they lock him in his room. It turns out that the people in the town are actually all goblins. And guys, Nilbog is goblin backwards. What? They're trying to turn humans into plants so that they can eat them. The entire movie is just filled with the town residents trying to get the families to eat. Also, Grandpa Seth dies like 5 times in the movie, and then he just keeps coming back. He also goes to hell for a second. The boys' friends turn into trees from the Goblin Queen, and there's a lot of scenes with people flailing at a slightly increased speed in one direction. Some may try to call it running, but no. These people were not running. I'm not sure what they were doing. The goblins also looked like they were played by slow-moving children. In fact, the costumes also looked like they were made by children. You know what? The whole movie seems to have been made by children, and not impressive film prodigy children, like preschool children who are progressing as they're supposed to. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked. I honestly could do a whole video on this, but I'm aware that we're not talking about horribly fantastic horror movies today, so I'll get back to the list. I really beg of you to please watch Troll 2. No, there's zero storyline connection to Troll. And in fact, there actually aren't any trolls in the movie, but please watch it because I could easily do an entire video just talking about Troll 2, and I would love for you guys to really understand what I'm talking about. Number 2, Flowers in the Attic. Okay, so I haven't actually watched this movie, but I have read the book. And the fact that it was made into a movie is upsetting to say the least. This movie includes the imprisonment of young siblings for years and eventually leads to, a twisted attraction forming. The plot begins with a family's father passing away in a car accident. After a couple of weeks, the mother tells her 4 children that they will be moving in with her very rich but estranged parents, and that they would be leaving immediately with only 4 suitcases. Upon arrival, the children are greeted by their grandmother, who is a tall, sophisticated, and stern-looking woman. She leads them in through a darkened back entrance up to a small room. The mother tells the group of children that they will be staying in the room until their grandfather forgives her for marrying her half-uncle. Yes, I'm glazing over that, but once she and her father make amends, she will introduce all of the children and they will live lavishly in the grand mansion forever. The children were required to stay quiet, but they were able to play in the large attic that was attached to the room, and they would be brought food once a day. But things aren't as they seem. The group would end up staying in the attic for over 3 years. The oldest 2, Chris and Kathy, took care of their younger siblings and attempted to bring joy and learning into their imprisonment. They would decorate the attic. Chris and Kathy's relationship developed into, I'm not going to say it, but I'm sure you can figure out what I'm not saying. Chris and Kathy first left the room with permission from their mother to watch a lavish holiday party that was taking place at the mansion. The next time they left the room was 3 years later, when they scaled down the side of the house and swam in a nearby pond. After years of their mother lying to them, they found out that her father had passed away years before, but wouldn't let them out of the room because of a clause in the inheritance she had received from her father. If it was revealed that she'd birthed children from her late husband, she would have to forfeit all of her money. Honestly, I'm kind of siding with the grandfather on this one. So, when the group figures that their mother never plans to release them, they decide to escape. In preparation for their escape, Chris and Kathy created a copy of a key left in the room at night to steal money from their mother. Most of the children do manage to escape, and this leads into the 8-book series. Yes, There are 8 of these books. I would love to say that I wouldn't recommend them, but the writing is actually really good. Number 1, Human Centipede. Yeah, I know everyone is expecting Human Centipede, but that's just because it's Human Centipede. It's so upsetting, it's so disgusting. I don't even want to talk about it. You know what? No, I refuse. I'm changing my mind. I'm not gonna talk about it. And honestly, I don't even think I can on this channel. Number 1.5, Creep. Yeah, this movie is disturbing. Never have I ever watched a movie that left me with such a disgusted, sinking feeling. Creep follows an amateur filmmaker, Aaron, who was hired to film a documentary for a man who is dying of a terminal illness and wanted to leave something behind for his son. Aaron drove out to a secluded house in the woods to meet Joseph, the man, and Joseph starts off his documentary strong. He asks Aaron to film him in the bathtub, scrub-a-dubbing and speaking of how sad he is that he will never meet his son. Then Aaron is scared by a realistic wolf mask, which Joseph tells him is named Peach Fuzz. Yes, Aaron stays. Then the pair go on a walk through the woods, alone, and Joseph keeps sneaking up and scaring Aaron. But it kinda seems like Aaron is warming up to Joseph. Joseph claims he just has a weird sense of humor. The two go to a diner and share a dinner that quickly turns very strange. Yes, even stranger. Joseph confesses that he had taken photos of Aaron before they had met, and that he had an animal within who is ready to kill. Back at the house, Aaron is ready to leave, but Joseph asks him to stay for a drink, and yeah, Aaron ends up staying. I know. Two have a drink, and Joseph shares some incredibly disturbing information with Aaron regarding his Peach Fuzz mask and his wife. Aaron puts something in Joseph's drink, takes his phone, and decides to call Joseph's wife in a hiding spot. Aaron is told that she is not his wife, she's his sister, and that Joseph does not have a terminal illness, and he doesn't have a son. She warns him to leave immediately. Freaked out, Aaron headed to leave, but when he exited his hiding place, Joseph was nowhere to be seen. Aaron, for some reason, looks around the house, like on the patio. Then Joseph sneaks up and scares Aaron, then says that he doesn't want to die, before running off. Aaron walks down the stairs to leave and finds Joseph wearing his Peach Fuzz mask and gyrating against the door. Aaron charges towards him, and then the camera cuts. We next see Aaron back at home complaining about receiving mailed gifts and videos from Joseph. Joseph sent Aaron a video of him burying large garbage bags in his yard. He sent a box containing a stuffed bear and a blade, or a stuffed wolf and a blade, and finally another video of Joseph apologizing for the first video. Aaron ripped open the wolf and he found a locket with both of their pictures inside of it. He throws everything away. The police provide no help or surveillance. One night, Aaron hears someone rummaging through the trash, and the viewers see Joseph standing at the front door. Another night, Joseph sneaks into Aaron's house and films Aaron while he sleeps. Soon after, Aaron finds another video of Joseph where Joseph explains how he found the locket in the garbage and how he wants Aaron to meet him by the lake for closure. You're probably thinking, of course Aaron won't go. No, he goes. He sets up his camera on and sits on a bench facing the water. Then, in his Peach Fuzz mask, Joseph comes up behind Aaron and ends his life with an axe. The movie closes with Joseph placing a tape labeled Aaron with a little heart on a shelf full of tapes just like it. He's heard on the phone introducing himself as Bill, requesting the exact same services that he had requested from Aaron. And yes, there is a creep too.
Number 5, Fire in the Sky. Based on the book The Walton Experience by Travis Walton, Fire in the Sky is set in 1975 and follows a logger named, Travis Walton, played by D.B. Sweeney from Arizona, who allegedly had a flying saucer experience that caused him to abruptly vanish for 5 days. His co-workers experienced mockery and disdain while being falsely charged with, killing. But allow me to back up and elaborate on the real story. Back in 1975, a forestry worker named, Travis Walton, was working in the area of Snowflake, Arizona, when a saucer-shaped craft with a high-pitched buzz entered their field of vision. Quick sidebar, the irony of a place in a hot state like Arizona being called Snowflake is hilarious to me. So Walton says that after he left the truck and approached the object, a beam of light suddenly appeared from the craft and knocked him unconscious. The other 6 men on the project were supposedly frightened and drove away. Walton says that he awoke in a hospital-like room being observed by 3 short, bald creatures. He says that he fought with them until a human wearing a helmet led him to another room, where he blacked out as 3 other humans put a clear plastic mask over his face. Now, Walton has said that he remembers nothing else until he found himself walking along a highway 5 days later with the flying saucer departing above him. So, on that same day, he appeared in town in a phone booth, surprising his employees who had fled, believing him to be dead. He alleges that extraterrestrials abducted him and examined him in that space that resembled that hospital. In the days following his UFO claim, the National Enquirer awarded Walton and his co-workers a $5,000 prize for Best UFO Case of the Year, after they were said to have passed polygraph tests administered by the Enquirer and the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, or APRO for short. You know how much I like my short forms. Walton, his older brother, and his mother were described by the Navajo County, Arizona sheriff as longtime students of UFOs. According to experts, all of the coworkers who weren't there who saw the spacecraft all took polygraph tests and all passed, except for one that was inconclusive. Which, you know, it happens. It's a good ratio though. So in 1978, Walton wrote his book, with the same title as the movie, detailing his claims, which became the basis for Fire in the Sky. Paramount Pictures decided that his account was too fuzzy and too similar to other televised close encounters, so they ordered a screenwriter to write a flashier, more provocative abduction story. Fire in the Sky grossed $19.9 million domestically on a $15 million budget and received mixed reviews. It was nominated though for 4 Saturn Awards, so that's pretty cool. Nevertheless, its alien abduction scenes are considered by many to be highly effective. In 2017, Pace named Fire in the Sky as one of the 25 best science fiction films on Netflix. I know what I'm watching tonight. Number 4, Hangar 10. So the Rendlesham UFO incident, which was released in the US as Hangar 10, is a 2014 found footage style British horror film directed by Daniel Simpson. It stars Danny Shaler, Abby Salt, and Robert Curtis as 3 friends who become lost in the Rendlesham forest and discover evidence of UFO activity decades after the original incident. It premiered at the Colchester Film Festival on the 22nd of October in 2014 and was released in the UK on February 9th of 2015. But before we get to the movie stuff, let's talk about the real story. So the Rendlesham Forest incident was a series of reported sightings of unexplained lights near the forest in Suffolk, England in December of 1980, which became linked with UFO landings. Now these events occurred just outside RAF Woodbridge, which was used at the time by the United States Air Force, or USAF for short. USAF personnel, including Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, claimed to see things they described as UFOs. The occurrence is the most famous of UFO events to have ever happened in the United Kingdom and is among the best known reported UFO events worldwide, sometimes called Britain's Roswell. The UK Ministry of Defence has stated that the event posed no threat to national security, so it was never investigated as a security matter. But what do they know that we don't? At around 3 a.m. on December 26 of 1980, good old Boxing Day, a security patrol near the east gate of RAF Woodbridge saw lights apparently descending into the forest and initially thought it was a downed aircraft. According to a memo, upon entering the forest to investigate, the servicemen witnessed a glowing object that was metallic in appearance with, colored lights. As they attempted to approach the object, it appeared to move through the trees, and the animals on a nearby farm went into quite the frenzy. One of the servicemen, Sergeant Jim Peniston, later claimed to have encountered a craft of unknown origin while in the forest, but never elaborated on the details. Shortly after 4, the local police were called to the scene, but reported that the only lights they could see were those from the Orford Ness Lighthouse, many miles away on the coast. After daybreak on that same morning, servicemen returned to a small clearing near the eastern edge of the forest and found 3 small impressions on the ground in a triangular pattern, as well as burn marks and broken branches on nearby trees. At 10:30, the local police were called out yet again, this time to see the impressions, which, they originally thought could have been made by an animal. Not any animal I know. The Deputy Base Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, the one I mentioned before, visited the site with several servicemen in the early hours, taking radiation readings in the triangle of depressions and in the surrounding area using an AN-PDR-27, which is apparently a standard US military radiation survey meter. Although they recorded 0.07 milliroentgens per hour, in other regions they detected 0.03 to 0.04, and which is around the background level. I'm not saying that word again. Furthermore, they detected a similar small burst for half a mile away from the landing site. It was during this investigation that a flashing light was seen across a field to the east, almost in line with a farmhouse, as the witnesses had seen on the first night. Later, according to Halt's memo, 3 star-like lights were seen in the sky, 2 to the north and 1 to the south. Later, according to Halt's memo, 3 star-like lights were seen in the sky, 2 to the north and 1 to the south, about 10 degrees above the horizon. He said that the brightest of these hovered for 2 to 3 hours and seemed to beam down a stream of light from time to time. So, let's get to the movie version. 33 years after the incident, 3 metal detector enthusiasts hunting for sacks and gold in the same region capture incredible footage of UFOs while filming their expedition. In classic horror movie tropes, their UFO detecting equipment fails, and they meet some pretty scary UFOs. The movie isn't well rated, but I never promised Hollywood blockbusters. Now did I? Number 3, Phoenix Forgotten. So this is a 2017 American found footage science fiction horror film directed by Justin Barber in his directorial debut, and written by Barber and T.S. Nowlin. The film is also produced by Nowlin alongside Ridley Scott, Wes Ball, Courtney Solomon, and Mark Canton. Originally advertised as Phoenix, the film tells the story of the disappearance of 3 teenagers who set out to find the source of the widely reported 1997 UFO phenomenon known as the Phoenix Lights. It was a It was released on April 21st of 2017 to some negative reviews, with many critics unfavorably comparing it to the Blair Witch Project. So, what really happened in real life? On March 13th of 1997, at 7:55 p.m. MST, a witness in Henderson, Nevada, reported seeing a large, V-shaped object traveling southeast. At 8:15 p.m., an unidentified former police officer in Paulden, Arizona, reported seeing a cluster of reddish-orange lights disappear over the southern horizon. Shortly afterwards, there were reports of lights seen over the Prescott Valley in Arizona. Tim Lay and his wife Bobby, his son Hal, and his grandson Damien first saw the lights when they were about 105 kilometers away from them. At first, the lights appeared to them as 5 separate and distinct lights in like an arc shape, as if they were on top of a balloon, but they soon realized the lights appeared to be moving towards them. So over the next 10 or so minutes, the lights appeared to come closer. The distance between the lights increased, eventually taking on the shape of an upside-down V. Eventually, when the lights appeared to be a couple of miles away, families said that they could make out a shape that looked like a 60-degree carpenter's square. I'm not even gonna try with that one. With 5 lights set into it, with 1 at the front and 2 on each side. Soon the object with the embedded lights appeared to be moving towards them, at about 100 to 150 feet above them, traveling so slowly that it gave the appearance of a silent hovering object, which seemed to pass over their heads and went through a V opening in the peaks of the mountain range towards a nearby mountain and also towards the direction of the Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. Between 8:30 and 8:45 p.m., witnesses in Glendale, which is northwest of Phoenix, saw the light formation pass overhead at an altitude high enough to become obscured by the thin clouds. Amateur astronomer Mitch Stanley in Scottsdale, Arizona, also observed the high altitude lights flying in formation through a telescope, and according to him, they were quite clearly individual airplanes. At approximately 10 p.m. that same evening, a large number of folks in the Phoenix area reported seeing a row of brilliant lights hovering in the sky, or slowly falling. A number of photos and videos were taken, prompting author Robert Schaefer to describe it as possibly the most widely witnessed UFO event in history. Number 2, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The movie depicts the tale of Roy Neary, played by Richard Dreyfuss, a common blue-collar worker from Indiana, whose life changes as a result of coming into contact with an alien craft. In another parallel story, the team follows a team of study experts with diverse backgrounds looking at the odd appearance of objects in remote places, mainly desert areas. So Close Encounters of the Third Kind genuinely draws inspiration from several different sources, including real people's encounters with UFOs, unlike the other movies on today's list that are based on a single event. Director Steven Spielberg hired Dr. J. Allen Hynek, a distinguished astronomer who created the UFO classification system from which the movie gets its name, to accurately portray the UFO sightings. So Hynek acted as scientific advisor to UFO studies undertaken by the US Air Force under 3 projects: Project Sign, Project Grudge, and the very well-known Project Blue Book. If you don't know it, I recommend looking it up, it's fascinating. So his classification for UFO sightings, according to increasing proximity, starts with nocturnal lights, which is pretty straightforward, simply lights in the night sky, and then it escalates to daylight discs, which are UFOs seen in the daytime and generally have disc or oval shapes. Next up, we've got radar visual. These are the UFO reports that have radar confirmation, offering harder evidence that the objects are real. Although I have to admit that radar propagation can be occasionally discredited due to atmospheric propagation anomalies. Now for the fun stuff. Close Encounters of the First Kind, which are visual sightings of an unidentified flying object seemingly less than 500 feet away that show an appreciable angular extension and considerable detail. This is followed by Close Encounters of the Second Kind, a UFO event in which a physical effect is alleged. This can be interference in the functioning of a vehicle or electronic device, animals reacting, a physiological effect such as paralysis or heat and discomfort in the witness, or some physical trace like impressions in the ground, scorched or otherwise affected vegetation, or a chemical trace. Finally, we have Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which are UFO encounters in which an animated entity is present. These include humanoids, robots, and humans who seem to be occupants or pilots of a UFO. Number 1, Battle Los Angeles. This movie tells the story of a global extraterrestrial invasion as witnessed by a Marine platoon attempting to defend Los Angeles. So the battalion has to fight its way out of the city as it is being looted by aliens because things don't go as planned by either party. The film story was partially inspired by the Battle of Los Angeles, which was a rumored enemy attack and subsequent anti-aircraft artillery barrage that took place in, LA during World War II on the night of February 24th of 1942. The incident occurred a day after the bombardment of Elwood, when an Imperial Japanese submarine launched shells at US aviation fuel tanks. West Coast tensions were already running high in the months after the December 1941 Pearl Harbor attack and entry of the US into the Second World War. Eyewitnesses and radar data reported an unknown aerial craft over the LA area on February 24th, leading to fears of a Japanese attack on the US mainland. island. But a review of the incident found no proof of Japanese presence in the area and attributed the incident to aliens. This very real incident was used as the main focus of an early teaser trailer to promote the film, in which it strongly implied that the alien invaders spent decades planning their attack and invasion. The filmmakers drew upon this historical event in an attempt to help ground the film in reality and to make it, as scary as possible.
At number 5, Insidious The Red Door. Standing as the 5th installment to the bone-chilling Insidious franchise, The Red Door acts as a conclusion to the Lambert family saga and their never-ending struggle with the Further and the many demons that inhabit the realm. The 2023 supernatural horror film has sent shivers down the spines of audiences, cementing its status as a terrifying addition to the Insidious franchise. Directed by Patrick Wilson in his directorial debut, this movie takes horror to new heights. The film reunites fans with familiar faces from previous installments such as Ty Simpkins, Rose Byrne, and Lynn Shay. The storyline takes place 9 years after the events of Insidious Chapter 2, and follows Josh Lambert, played by Patrick Wilson, who is grappling with repressed memories of his traumatic experiences in the Further, a realm beyond our own that harbors dark spirits. His life is in disarray, with a strained relationship with his son Dalton. When Dalton begins to paint a disturbing image of the eponymous red door that leads to the Further, the horror unfolds. As Dalton delves into the world of astral projection, he encounters a malevolent spirit at his college frat party. This spirit, coupled with a YouTube video featuring Elise Rainier, a recurring character in the Insidious series that explains astral projection and the Further, sets the stage for spine-chilling events. Dalton's attempts at astral projection lead to a confrontation with the menacing red-faced demon that haunted him as a child. Yes, that same infamous demon from the first Insidious movie. The plot thickens when Dalton's brother Foster reveals recurring dreams of a possessed Josh trying to harm them, a callback to Insidious Chapter 2, where the Lambert family has their memories wiped of the terrifying events at the end of the movie. Dalton's artistic expression becomes a vehicle for unlocking repressed memories, as his paintings reveal the truth behind their family's haunting past. However, Dalton gets trapped in the Further, forcing Josh and his now ex Renee to journey into the Further and rescue him. The film builds suspense as they confront the demon in a terrifying showdown, leading to a climactic battle to seal the Red Door and banish the Further's horrors once and for all. Insidious The Red Door masterfully combines psychological horror with supernatural elements. The fear factor is amplified as the characters confront their past and the malevolent forces that threaten to consume them. The demon's relentless pursuit keeps viewers on the edge of their seats. The film's success is evident in its box office performance, grossing an impressive $187 million worldwide, making it the highest grossing film in the Insidious franchise. While it has received mixed reviews from critics, it has undeniably struck a chord with horror enthusiasts, leaving them trembling with fear and eagerly anticipating what nightmares the franchise will conjure next. As the movie concludes with a hint of reconciliation and a glimmer of hope, it leaves the audience with a lingering sense of unease. Insidious The Red Door proves that the franchise still knows how to terrify and captivate, making it a must-watch for horror aficionados. Next, at number 4, Malum. A reboot of the 2014 film Last Shift, Malum is a horror thriller directed by Anthony de Blasi, which released in May. The premise is that of a rookie cop taking the last shift at a decommissioned police station where a group of cult members ended their lives years prior. The perfect recipe for a horror movie that will leave you shaking in your very seat. The film begins with a disturbing glimpse of young girls in extreme distress, accompanied by gruesome and gory images to boot. Throughout the movie, there is a recurring theme of bovine symbolism that adds to the eerie atmosphere, as cult members sing and dance in praise of an entity known as the Low God. Luckily, the cult is put to a stop when we are introduced to Will Lauren, a hero cop who had previously raided a cult led by a man named John Malum. Hey, that's the title of the movie. He saves the captive girls from a ritualistic sacrifice. However, in a dark twist, Lauren brutally kills 3 fellow officers before doing the same to himself, while expressing his devotion to the enigmatic Low God. A year later, we meet Jessica Lauren, the daughter of Will, a rookie cop preparing for her first shift. She harbors resentment towards her father and seeks answers about his violent rampage. Her journey begins in her father's old precinct, where she meets many cult members known as mountain folk. Inside the deserted station, she encounters a series of eerie occurrences, including disturbing visions and cryptic phone calls. As Jessica's investigation continues, she discovers footage showcasing the brutality of John Malum and his cult, including a gruesome sequence. She learns that her her own mother, Diane, was part of the cult, and Jessica herself was baptized in the red bodily fluids of Malum. The tension escalates when the police station is raided by Malum's followers, and Jessica attempts to rescue kidnapped girls, only to witness their horrifying deaths. The film reaches its climax when Jessica's mother returns to the station, and Jessica is forced to face the demon they call the Low God, only to discover that it is her own mother. In a heart-wrenching moment, Jessica takes her own life, leading her into a nightmarish afterlife. The film ends with Jessica in hell, sitting beside Malum as his queen. Pretty messed up if you ask me, but hey, we don't watch horror movies for their happy endings. At number 3, Bird Box Barcelona. If any of you remember when the first Bird Box movie took the world by storm in 2018, I'm sure most of you remember when the first Bird Box movie took the world by storm in 2018. The premise was simple. There are monsters that kill you if you can see them, so everyone has to live a life of blindness in order to survive in a post-apocalyptic world. The movie garnered so much success that they released a spin-off sequel, Bird Box Barcelona, this July. As the title suggests, the movie takes place in the same world as the first, but instead of rural America, it's in Barcelona, Spain. A man named Sebastian and his daughter Anna journey together in this desolate landscape where survival relies on blindfolds worn outdoors to shield against these malevolent beings. On their journey, they encounter a group of survivors who believe that they know the whereabouts of a generator that can provide light and warmth. He joins them in a shelter with a bus hangar. However, as dawn breaks, Sebastian takes a sinister turn. He drives a bus outside, causing everyone to lose their blindfolds, and slowly guides them to open their eyes, ensuring that they come in contact with the horrifying entities, killing them. Astonishingly, Sebastian remains unaffected, revealing himself as a seer. His daughter Anna commends her father for saving these people and encourages him to find other lost sheep. A stark contrast from the more heroic protagonist of the first movie. The narrative then rewinds 9 months, when the entities first emerged, prompting mass migration. Sebastian and Anna found refuge in a church under the guidance of Padre Esteban, who viewed these entities as angels liberating humanity from suffering through death. Despite their attempts to hide, a group of seers led by Padre captured them. Tragically, Anna was forced to open her eyes and perished. When Sebastian confronted the entities, he didn't meet his end, but instead saw an apparition of Anna, a presence that has accompanied him ever since, urging him to save others. Yeah, this one's weird. Throughout the movie, Sebastian attempts to save all sorts of other survivors, until finding a change of heart, and he begins to resist the influence of his late daughter's apparition. This conflict within himself comes to a close when he sacrifices his own life to aid 2 other survivors so they can get to a safe haven and potentially find a way to counteract the monsters that no one can see. It's an interesting concept and a scary movie, but the film garnered little success, as many say it doesn't capture the same mystery and fear that its predecessor did. At number 2, Infinity Pool. Released in January, Infinity Pool is a sci-fi horror film about a struggling writer and his wife on vacation who, after an accident, discover the country's dark culture. Author James Foster and his wife Em vacation to the fictional seaside country of Litolka. Their already strained marriage takes a darker turn when they befriend a couple, Gabby and Albin, fans of James' sole published book. Together, they break the resort rules to explore the countryside. During their excursion, a tragic accident occurs when James hits a local man while driving, causing his death. Gabby insists that they can't involve the corrupt local authorities, and a unique form of justice is revealed. The guilty can pay a fee to be cloned, and the clone is executed in their place. James, using his wife's wealth, opts for this option but must watch his clone's execution. Em is appalled and wants to leave, but James is oddly drawn to the spectacle. As James's stay extends, he meets a group of tourists who annually return to commit crimes and watch their clones die. Encouraged by this group, James descends into a life of crime, partaking in robberies, abusing staff, and killing locals. James's descent reaches a horrifying point when he's tricked into brutalizing his own clone. In a moment of clarity, he tries to escape but is abducted by the group, who want him to become a fellow killer tourist. After fleeing and collapsing at a farm, James is once again confronted by the group, who demand he kill his own clone. He reluctantly does so, visibly disturbed. Gabby's bizarre act of comfort further unsettles him. As the group leaves for the US, James decides to stay behind. Alone amidst a monsoon at the closed resort, he reflects on the harrowing events he has experienced. Yeah, creepy as hell. If I had a clone, I'd probably just ask him to do chores and play video games with me. None of that weird killing stuff. Number 1, Talk to Me. Released in July, Talk to Me is an Australian supernatural horror film about a group of teenagers who discover they are able to contact spirits using a mysterious embalmed hand. But things take a turn for the worst when one of them takes things too far. The story goes like this. At a crowded house party, Cole searches for his brother Duckett, but their encounter takes a horrifying turn as Duckett stabs his brother and then himself in the face. 17-year-old Mia grapples with her mother Rhea's death 2 years earlier and her strained relationship with her father Max. Mia, along with her friend Jade and Jade's brother Riley, sneaks out to a gathering where a severed, embalmed hand with mysterious powers is the main attraction. This hand allows people to commune with spirits by saying, "Talk to me," and then letting the spirit possess them by saying, "I let you in," for up to 90 seconds. Mia is the first to try it, and she becomes possessed by a malevolent spirit with a dangerous interest in Riley. However, others at the gathering manage to sever the connection before anything terrible happens. The group gathers again the next night at Jade's house to use the hand. Riley, against Jade's wishes, participates and appears to be possessed by Mia's deceased mother Rhea, seeking reconciliation. Mia lets the possession continue beyond the time limit, and Riley's body is taken over by malevolent spirits, causing him to repeatedly harm himself. This is where things go really awry. Haunted by visions of Rhea, Mia is ostracized by Jade and her mother Sue, who blame her for Riley's condition. Mia uses the hand secretly to contact Rhea, who claims her death was accidental and that she must help Riley, who remains possessed and constantly harms himself. Rhea tells Mia that Riley must die to be set free, leading Mia to kidnap Riley from the hospital. She is on the brink of pushing him into oncoming traffic, but when Rhea insists they'll have him forever, Mia realizes the spirits are manipulating her. She steps away, and Jade arrives just in time to save Riley. Mia ends up injured on the road, and in a surreal twist, realizes she has died and become a spirit. She is drawn to another party where the same ritual with the embalmed ham has taken place. The story concludes with Mia becoming part of the spectral cycle, as someone at the new party says, "I let you in." Damn, don't mess with severed hands, I guess, you guys.
Number 5, Midsommar. So, first up on our list of the scariest movies is gonna be Midsommar, a movie that may hold the record for the fastest time I have ever seen something become a classic. I think Midsommar became a horror movie classic roughly 30 seconds or so after we left the theater. And there are some out there who knock on Midsommar for not being enough of a horror movie, but I would like to say boo on you. I think that's mostly bogus, just because it takes place during the day, and because like Hereditary before it, Midsommar is that nice kind of elevated horror that doesn't just get your hair standing on end and your spine all chilled, but also manages to get under your skin and start to pick away at stuff you didn't even know you were insecure and scared about. Just a bit after Ari Aster had traumatized all of us out of ever looking at a stop sign the same way in Hereditary, we got Midsommar, which will ensure I will never look at a bear the same way ever again. While Hereditary picked apart at the foundations of a crumbling family, Midsommar instead takes us into watching a friend group and a young couple getting torn apart, both metaphorically, which is scary in a very esoteric way, and literally, which is scary in a wow, that's disgusting kind of way. After a horrific, sad tragedy claims the lives of most of young Danny's family, she and her boyfriend find themselves growing distant from one another. Things look like they're gonna change when her boyfriend Christian invites her to a Swedish commune with his classmates. What looks at first like an idyllic vacation quickly unravels when it seems that commune is a Swedish word meaning scary pagan human sacrifice call, and Danny finds herself at odds with a new family that seems to welcome her grief with open arms. Midsommar contrasts gorgeous visuals of the Swedish landscape with some of the most stomach-churning body horror I've seen in a Hollywood production recently. Do you know what a blood eagle is, my friends? If you don't, do yourself a favor and don't Google that, okay? And if you do, yeah, well, you just know how horrible that was in this movie, eh? I figured we've all seen Midsommar. It's non-stop scares, but somehow, if you haven't, let me be the 1000th person to tell you you should watch this movie. If you like spooky cult movies, this is probably one of the best out there. Just, don't be surprised if you can't bear some of the stuff that happens in this movie. That's a little pun about a bear. Now, my friends, if you're looking for more videos about horror movies you should watch, maybe some scary urban legends, stuff about SCPs, aliens, and just about anything freaky, well, subscribe to Top 5 Scary, because we got all of that and then some. Stay scared, stay subscribed. Number 4, Incantation. Coming up next on the list is gonna be Incantation. It's the most recent one on this list. It just came out, and I guarantee it's not like anything else you've seen, unless you're a huge fan of Taiwanese found footage cinema, in which case, yeah, it'll probably be pretty similar to that, because that's what it is. Right off the bat, Incantation invites the viewer to join in on it, with one of the characters breaking the fourth wall and directly asking the audience to say a prayer for her daughter, which I think is such a good hook to immediately get you into a movie. A little bit of audience interaction, and then forming the movie as a found footage horror movie made it seem that much more real. Like, you kind of forget that you're watching a production. It immerses you into the characters as much as a movie possibly could. A young woman named Lee Ronan reveals to us that years earlier she broke a religious taboo by spying on a secret ritual, and as such cursed herself and her bloodline. And when her daughter is born, she finds herself being haunted by a malevolent spirit. This movie is like a buffet plate of horror genres. If you like haunted house stuff, demon possession stuff, exorcisms, well, this movie brings all of that to the table and makes all of it gripping and horrifying. And if you like really inventive, metatextual, postmodern horror stuff, well, the framing device and the found footage elements really pump it all up, and I wouldn't dream of giving away the movie's twists, but it has some that you genuinely cannot possibly see coming that turn the whole experience on its head. And admittedly, maybe this is more me telling on myself for having a very Hollywood-esque kind of centralized North American horror movie palette, but it's very refreshing to see a story centered around people I don't see often in movies and a culture I don't see often in movies, somewhere I don't see often, making an already inventive script just feel that much more fresh, you know? Don't be afraid of the subtitles, and don't deprive yourself out of Incantation if you're looking for a great new cursed movie to watch. Just, if you want my advice, definitely say your prayers before and after watching, you know, just to be absolutely safe. Number 3, Killing of a Sacred Deer. Coming up next is going to be Killing of a Sacred Deer from Yorgos Lanthimos, who has one of my favorite names in cinema. I needed at least one really psychological horror movie on this list that I figured most of you probably haven't seen. Like all of Lanthimos' filmography, Sacred Deer is relentlessly weird. If you want to watch a movie that's going to leave you shaking, sweating, and asking yourself in your dark living room, what the hell did I just watch? Then you're gonna love Sacred Deer, okay? A heart surgeon named Steven, played by Colin Farrell. He's got a perfect life, 2 children, a successful career, and a very, very strange relationship with a mysterious young boy named Martin, played excellently by Barry Keoghan. We learn that years earlier, Steven had operated on Martin's father, but failed to save his life, and since then has kind of taken Martin in and kept an extremely odd paternal relationship with the exceedingly strange boy, who seems determined to force himself into Steven's family by any means necessary. As Martin begins to uncomfortably ingratiate himself with Steven's children, their health starts to worsen in mysterious, paranormal ways that hospitals can't explain, and it seems like Martin knows a lot more than he's letting on. This movie feels like an actual honest-to-God nightmare that somebody filmed. It's kind of hard to describe. It doesn't really have jump scares. It's got next to no gore. There's like blood, I guess, but most of the horror comes from this unending dread, this creeping, unsettling feeling in the air that everything you're seeing is wrong. Every single line of dialogue in this movie does not sound like it was written or performed by a human being. I know that sounds like a bad movie, but everyone is performing so well that the atmosphere is like a mile thick. Everyone just talks in a way that's not in a way you expect or you're used to. It seems like everyone's from a different planet ever so slightly. It's so surreal, it feels like an extended dream. There's a scene where Barry Keoghan's character is describing how he and his dad used to eat spaghetti the same way, by swirling noodles around a fork, and it's a very innocuous conversation, but the whole thing around it is so chilling, it genuinely had me sweating. If there's anyone who thinks Barry Keoghan isn't gonna make a good Joker, please watch this movie and then come right back to me. This guy is so good at being a lunatic. This one is not gonna be for everybody, I'll be straight up. If you like your horror a little bit artsy, like if Midsommar and Hereditary totally spoke to you, Killing of a Sacred Deer probably will as well. But, you know, if you're looking for something with like a guy in a mask who's breaking through windows and pulling on Jamie Lee Curtis's ponytail, this might not be up your alley. If you're looking for something splattery and splashy, well, it might just leave you extremely confused. Number 2, The Ritual. Coming up next on the list is going to be The Ritual from director David Bruckner, part of the horror collective that contributed to the cult classic found footage movie VHS, as well as directing 2020's The Lighthouse. The Ritual is one you can find on Netflix, and if you don't load it up after this video immediately, we're probably gonna have an issue. A group of college friends meet together after a shocking tragedy claims the life of one of their friends in a random robbery. Now, before the incident, they all had made plans to hike in the woods of Sweden, and let me just pause here for a minute. Is it a bit odd that 2 of the scariest horror movies made in the last 10 years involve a group of friends going out on a vacation to Sweden? If I'm learning anything from this list in contemporary filmmaking, it's that it's not nearly as welcoming as I thought. But I digress. The friends go to Sweden in their late friend's honor and discover that it is really not the best of ideas when things turn horribly wrong very quickly. Discovering an elk gutted out in the woods, they suspect there is a lot more out in those woods than just the wildlife. The ritual is kind of like if the Blair Witch Project and the Wicker Man loved each other very dearly and had a beautiful baby and they let it play with Midsommar on the weekends. You get to watch a friend group at odds with themselves lost in the woods, deal with mysteries of a secret Nordic cult, and it's got lots of good creepy supernatural cult stuff, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but I'll say it's got one of the coolest monsters put to film in recent memory I can think of. I would love a statue of that thing. And finally, coming in at our #1 spot is going to be The Mist. Directed by Frank Darabont, who is probably the king of adapting Stephen King's works into films, having directed The Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, and The Mist. Interestingly though, unlike The Green Mile and The Shawshank Redemption, which are both very accurate depictions of the source material, The Mist deviates a little bit. It's got an alternate ending which is way darker than the original story, but here's the catch: Stephen King actually says he prefers it, which has to be the highest compliment possible. If the guy who wrote the original terrifying story can watch the movie and say, you did a better job. He certainly didn't say that about Stanley Kubrick. If you don't know the plot of The Mist, like all Stephen King movies, it takes place in a small town in Maine when a massive thunderstorm has descended upon the community. It focuses on a group of ordinary people caught in a grocery store locked in as a mysterious mist starts to encircle the town, and strange creatures from beyond this world start to complicate things. This thing is very tight, focusing on what happens to normal people when put up against the most overwhelming odds imaginable, trapped with eldritch horrors threatening them just outside their little sanctuary of suburbia, and trying to protect your family from all the danger. It is tense as all get out. If you like monsters and creative monsters too, oh man is The Mist a treat. They hide them well, you know, in the mist. You never get too good a look at any of them, but that wouldn't be much fun. The way they do it here, letting you catch glimpses here and there, and letting your mind fill in all the horrible details and all the tentacle abominations, oh baby, that's horror at its finest. Reminds me a bit of Cloverfield in that regard. You know, The Mist might not be the scariest movie ever made, but it is an absolutely great one that is often forgot about sometimes when we discuss great horror movies. It's out there on Netflix, so you got no reason not to. In fact, I tried pretty hard to curate this list of mostly stuff that was streaming on Netflix so you could watch them after I was done talking about them. Don't say the casual Crypt Keeper doesn't do anything nice for you now.
Number 5 on this list is Atuk. This movie isn't one that you're going to be able to find on Netflix or anything like that, and let me tell you why. Insider says if you've never heard of Atuk, that's because this movie was so cursed it never actually got made. Ironically, it wasn't even supposed to be a scary movie. A comedy about an Inuit hunter using traditional techniques to survive in an urban environment. It's not the movie you would immediately suspect is ripe for a cursing. Yet, many of the actors who were signed on to play the lead role have died prematurely, including John Belushi, Chris Farley, and John Candy. Actors who were cast in supporting roles weren't immune either, with Phil Hartman also facing a violent and tragic early end after being attached to the film. It's definitely a bit of a stretch to suggest that this movie was somehow involved in the deaths of these actors, but it is quite an incredible coincidence that they all met an early demise after getting involved. In any case, it's certainly interesting that multiple attempts to develop and produce this movie have never come to fruition. I think it's also certainly interesting that people who keep trying to make this movie keep freaking dying. Like, why is this happening? I understand that it seems like a bit of a stretch to say this movie has anything to do with it, but what the heck else could it be? How many times did just a bunch of people start doing a thing and dying right when they start it? Like, I feel as if this doesn't happen that often, guys, and somehow, some way, this movie or maybe the script has something to do with it. Maybe the director or the producer or the writer of this movie is cursed, and that's why they were never able to actually get it done. Rest in peace to everyone who tried to make this thing. I'm sure it would have been a funny movie, but I think it's best for everyone involved if we call it quits before more people end up getting hurt. Number 4 on this list is The Conjuring. They haven't been able to make a movie in this series yet without something going wrong. Insider says pretty much every movie in the Conjuring universe has had some spooky happenings on set. Based loosely on the real experiences of paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, all Conjuring movies were absolutely terrifying. There have been so many reports of strange and paranormal happenings on the sets, it's hard to pick just one. They're all equally creepy. Annabelle had reports of light fixtures falling on actors, and The Conjuring had actors finding mysterious bruises on their bodies. But the paranormal activity on the set of The Nun was especially interesting because this is one of the few cases where there was just a good old-fashioned haunting on the set. Director Corin Hardy stated that he encountered two spirits while filming on location at a fortress in Romania. He stepped into a room while the cameras were rolling and found two people he assumed were crew members. When the camera stopped rolling and he turned around, they were gone. This one isn't exactly fair, I guess, because yeah, they were ghost encounters on set, but they were also shooting on location in a very old fortress, so it's very possible those ghosts were there for other reasons and the movie was just also happening to film at that location. Still, having a direct encounter with a ghost on the set of a horror movie you're directing is enough to unsettle anyone. Whether they were from the castle or from the movie, it really doesn't matter to me. All that matters is that they were there, and that is enough to make anyone freak the heck out. Next time you watch the Conjuring movies, you can walk into it knowing that there was also something else afoot other than the spooky stuff on screen. Number 3 on this list is Poltergeist. Of course, one of the scariest horror movies has one of the scariest sets. Insider says Poltergeist is a creepy movie, sure, but it doesn't have the shock value of R-rated horror movies. The visual effects haven't exactly held up well, and plenty of horror films get made without any unusual happenings. So why, might you ask, would the set of Poltergeist have been haunted? Look no further than the props. As it was far too expensive to make realistic looking rubber and plastic skeletons, they opted to use real human skeletons on set for the scene in which actress Jo Beth Williams is pulled into the mud of her swimming pool by a bunch of skeletons. Honestly, this seems like a reckless move. You're just asking to be cursed, and cursed it was. In the scene in which a clown puppet gets possessed and strangles the Freeling's young son, Robbie, things went awry. During the filming of the scene, the mechanical clown puppet that was created to simulate the strangulation malfunctioned and actually started choking the actor during a take. Writer-producer Steven Spielberg had to jump in and rescue the child actor from his inanimate attacker. This obviously raised some red flags to the people working on the set and paranormal experts, but rumors really started spiraling when several of the people who worked on the film died pretty much right after they were done filming. 2 of the cast members from the original died right after they finished the movie, and then 2 more cast members died in a similar timeline after filming the sequels. Nowadays, people are scared about making another sequel because of whatever it is that's going on. Maybe it wasn't just a mechanical malfunction when that clown started going off after all. Number 2 on this list is The Exorcist. This is often considered one of the scariest movies of all time. Insider says The Exorcist has a reputation for being one of the scariest movies of its time, perhaps of all time. If any movie was haunted or cursed in reality, it'd have been this one. There were tons of things that went wrong on set, from set malfunctions to 2 different actresses sustaining significant injuries during stunts gone wrong. This led many to believe that there was some malicious entity on set giving filmmakers a hard time. Perhaps the biggest evidence of supernatural meddling was a suspicious fire that forced the production to rebuild much of the set. It was theorized that a bird flew into some electrical equipment on set, but the resulting fire destroyed a large section of the set while mysteriously leaving Reagan's room set alone. If you've seen The Exorcist, you know that that room was the area the demon most frequently occupied in the film. The superstition around this film is so great, some believe it's dangerous to even play the movie. Doing so invites negative entities toward you, as the urban legend goes, similar to using a Ouija board. When the fear literally extends all the way to people even watching the movie, that's when you know that something is seriously up. I personally think that something paranormal had to be going on here. Maybe the reason that the movie was so scary and blew so many people away is because they managed to capture some of the real evil energy. Maybe that's why every time people watch it, it just spooks us to our cores. Obviously, it's just a theory, but it might make sense. Number 1 on this list is The Omen. This movie was just doomed from the start. Screen Rant says, The Omen is yet another film that is notorious for having a haunted production. To start off, the original star of the film, Gregory Peck, and executive Mark Newfield both traveled in planes that were struck by lightning. Peck then shot himself in the head a few months before shooting was set to start. One scene was filmed at a zoo, which focuses on the reactions of baboons. The baboons were so wild that an animal trainer had to be brought on set, but the animal trainer died the next day after a tiger got hold of his head. One of the special effects technicians named John Richardson got into a car accident about a month after the film was released, and while he survived, his passenger Liz Moore was beheaded. What the heck? It seems like everything that could have possibly went wrong did in fact go wrong for this movie. Like, we had multiple people who didn't even make it to the set for multiple reasons. I personally have never seen The Omen before, so if you've watched it, please let me know in the comments. What the heck was it about this movie that would have set something off? And was it clear that something was wrong while you were watching the movie? I'd love to hear it. Number 5 on this list is The Crow, a 1994 gothic horror superhero movie that's earned quite the cult following since its release. Similarly to some of our other entries on this list, it had one of the most tragic filming processes ever. Slash Film writes, The Crow had a slow and rocky production. According to Cursed Films, during pre-production, a mysterious figure called the offices and left a voicemail asking production to stop. This was followed by multiple tragedies. An electrician was badly burned, others were injured, then Lee died as the film was finishing filming, shot by accident when a prop gun malfunctioned. Since the film was late in production, the person responsible for handling weapon safety wasn't around to supervise the scene and wasn't able to ensure that all props were safe to use. Lee's scenes were completed by using a mixture of body doubles and then revolutionary CGI, but the film kept that charged and sad legacy, which has become impossible to separate from the story itself. Who was that mysterious figure, and how did they know something bad was gonna happen? People have speculated that the phone call that was made was from a spirit from the other side. They believe that by going against the spirit and not doing what it said resulted in the tragedies that occurred. This could also be the curse that affects you if you watch this movie. A few people have reported getting a strange call a few days after seeing this film from an undisclosed number. The phone call will start super weirdly and will eventually tell them to stop doing something in their life. Just like what happened with the movie, if they continue to do whatever they were told not to, bad things will occur. Number 4 on this list is The Innkeepers. The Innkeepers is a really interesting one. You see, this movie is cursed based on where it was shot. Slash Film says, interestingly, West, who was the director of the movie, decided to make the film after hearing that the hotel where his crew stayed while shooting his previous film, The House of the Devil, was haunted. Well, the hotel that inspired the film is actually in the film, said West in an interview with IndieWire. The staff at the hotel believe it's haunted. The whole town believes it's haunted, so it has this kind of mystique quality to it. While West said that he's a skeptic and doesn't believe in ghosts, he and the cast lived in the hotel for the duration of the shooting, and he did see some doors opening and closing and TVs turning on and off, and mentioned that everyone who was sleeping there had very vivid dreams. Sarah Paxton, the star of the film, said that at nights her door would also violently fly open. It might just be because this is a scary movie and people get scared, but some people have reported similar occurrences happening in their home after they watch this movie. As if the haunting that happened at that hotel where they shot it somehow comes into the space where the movie is played. I'm not sure how much of this one I believe, but they did film it at an actual haunted location, so you never know. Number 3 on this list is Rosemary's Baby. One of the scariest movies of all time, might be one of the most cursed of all time, and this curse might even affect you when you watch it. Slash Films writes, at a party, the film's composer, Christoph Komeda, fell off a rocky slope and into a coma that he never recovered from, similar to the actions that the witches take in the novel to get rid of Rosemary's friend. Then there's also the story of Sharon Tate, Roman Polanski's wife. Reportedly, Tate auditioned repeatedly for the role of Rosemary, which ended up going to Pharaoh. She makes a background appearance in one of the film's scenes. While the film was still in theaters, Tate was killed in her home by followers of Charles Manson. At the time, she was pregnant. All of these events stoked the fear and the interest of the public, giving the film a bump in popularity and an infamous reputation. Levin himself said that he had mixed feelings about the film, claiming that while it gave him access to exclusive literary circles, it also helped popularize the occult and Satanism, which was prevalent during that time period. There was obviously something going on with the creation of this movie, and people believe that it can also be passed over to the viewer. Clearly, tragedy was involved when this movie was being made, and some sort of spirit or some sort of demonic omen was afoot. That tragic luck will, in rare cases, come in the form of a curse to somebody who watches this movie. This could all be fake Reddit stuff, but there was a story of how somebody watched this movie and then 9 days after doing so, while on a hike with their family, fell off of a rocky slope and got put into a coma, just like what happened to Komeda. Maybe this was a coincidence, maybe this wasn't even true, I'm not really sure. All we can say for sure is that something haunted the actual production of this movie, and I don't think it's that much of a stretch to think that that haunting could continue to those who watched this as well.
In at number 5 we have The Descent, 2005. First up, we have The Descent, a British film from 2005 about a caving exhibition. We follow a group of 7 women exploring a cave that's never been explored before. The only way out of the cave is through it, so they travel deeper and deeper until they're trapped deep underground. We watch as one by one they meet a horrible fate, some accidental climbing mistakes, others descending into madness. They soon find out they are not alone in the cave and are being pursued by terrifying hordes of crawlers, but what we might today call Wendigo. They are a race of cave-dwelling humanoids who have adapted to near-constant darkness and lost any previous trace of humanity they may have had, becoming monsters in the process. The girls start to turn on each other while they struggle to survive in the darkness. They created 2 different endings for this film after deciding that the British ending was too dark for the US audience. In the US ending, our main character wakes up in the cave and crawls to the surface back to her car. When she is driving away, she pulls over and vomits, and when she leans back in the car, she is startled by the ghost of Juno sitting in the passenger seat. However, in the British version they reveal that this was all a trick of her mind, and she wakes up back in the cave, having never escaped at all. The film ends with the screams of the crawlers getting louder as they surround her. This one is enough to make anyone scared of the dark. Coming in at number 4 we have Ringu, 1998, aka The Ring. We have all heard about the adaptation of The Ring, but have you seen the original, more horrifying one, Ringu? The story follows a reporter and her ex-husband as they investigate the sudden death of her niece, who died of a sudden heart failure with an unnaturally horrified expression on her face. She then finds out that her niece recently visited a cabin with her friends. Each of them had died the exact same way on the exact same night. She visits the cabin to find out what could have caused them all to die so suddenly when she finds the unlabeled tape. After watching the tape, she understands that they had all been cursed as she was now. Things become more tense when Reiku's young son watches the tape, starting the 1-week countdown before he too dies. She has to break the curse or she and everyone she cares about will die in less than a week. Their discovery takes them to a volcanic island where they can discover that the video has a connection to a psychic who died 30 years ago and her child. In the end, they discover that the only way to break the curse is to copy it and show it to someone else, passing it on to them, dooming them instead of you. It's a good thing no one has a VHS player anymore. In at number 3 we have A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. This one is sure to keep you up at night. A Nightmare on Elm Street follows a group of teenagers battling a killer who attacks in their dreams. We follow Nancy and her friends trying to figure out why they're being hunted and how to stop it. This was our first introduction to the infamous Freddy Krueger, a killer who is badly burned all over his body. He uses a gloved hand with razors to kill his victims. Nowadays we all know who Freddy Krueger is, but in 1984 a killer who hunts you in your dreams was truly terrifying. Nancy has to struggle to stay awake throughout the filmmaking, depending on caffeine to keep her awake for days on end. They slowly discover that they are being hunted due to their parents being involved with Freddy's death. Nancy's mum revealed Krueger was an insane child murderer who had been released on a technicality and then burned alive by parents living on their street seeking vigilante justice. They attempt to bring Krueger out of the dream so they can kill him in the physical world. Could you stay awake for 7 days to avoid Freddy? I couldn't. In at number 2 we have Psycho, 1960. This was the original slasher film. When Psycho premiered in 1960, the audiences were screaming in horror. They could not believe their eyes. It took the world by storm and instantly became a classic for horror lovers. Alfred Hitchcock wanted to shock audiences and do something no one else had ever done before. The audience were horrified that Marion Crane, the main character, had been so brutally murdered. Never before had a main character died in a film, and here she was stabbed repeatedly within the first 30 minutes. Hitchcock even received an angry letter from one man claiming his daughter is now refusing to shower thanks to this film. The film continues when Marion's sister starts to wonder where she is. Marion had stolen money from her previous job and was hoping to make a new life when she stumbled into the Bates Motel. Lila hires a private detective to look into the disappearance. Once he goes to the Bates Motel, he too never returns. When Lila and her partner Sam go to visit the house, they see Norman Bates in the window. They go to the police to report all of the mysterious disappearances, where they are told that Norman's mother, has been dead for 10 years. Later it is revealed that Norman Bates had multiple personalities and had been acting as himself and his mother since her death, killing unsuspecting women who visit the motel. It might not seem like much now, but this film was as terrifying and horrific as films came in the 60s and paved the way for the horror genre. Freaked me the out. I saw it at 4. Accidentally.
Number 5, Renfield. I feel like this is the rare movie where I honestly don't need to see a single trailer or even hear a single fact or tidbit of trivia to know I want to see it, other than one piece of information. Nicolas Cage plays Dracula in this movie. Okay, moving on. We're gonna go on to number 4. No, okay, I'll actually fill it out a bit. We'll talk about Renfield just a little bit. As if you need anything more than Nicolas Cage plays Dracula. Renfield is an upcoming horror comedy featuring the immortal Count Dracula, and I think he's played by, I don't know, some like B-movie actor or something, and his humble manservant Renfield, who's been indebted to Dracula for centuries and is growing more than a bit weary of it. The two of them find themselves in modern Louisiana, a far cry away from the Romanian castles the Count is used to, and trouble arises when his servant finds himself falling in love with a police officer and comedy ensues. Interestingly, this script was inspired by a pitch from Robert Kirkman. You probably know him as the creator of The Walking Dead and Invincible, and was adapted into a screenplay. Kirkman isn't particularly known for his comedy, he's definitely known for his violence and gore, so it's a bit of a step outside his comfort zone. Alongside Nicolas Cage in the starring role is an all-star cast of actors. Nicholas Hoult from Mad Max, X-Men, The Menu is playing the eponymous Renfield. Awkwafina is the police officer he finds himself smitten with, and we got Parks and Rec alum and Sonic the Hedgehog voice actor Ben Schwartz as a mop. Nicolas Cage in comedies is some of his best. The unbearable weight of massive talent was a real surprise hit for me. Definitely go see that. Nick Cage plays himself, it's fantastic. And if you've somehow done yourself the utter disservice of never having seen Vampires Kiss, I implore you, please go get that done. Since Nick Cage plays a vampire in that, and it's absolutely hilarious. It's one of the most insane performances he's ever given. Renfield is set to drop in April, and you can absolutely believe I will be there front row day one. And if you're looking for more scary movie content, true tales of terror, fake fibs of frights, ghouls, goblins, aliens, cryptids, and everything freaky under the sun and above it, well, have I got something for you. Is this playlist on Top 5 Scary? Click through, stay scared, but most importantly, stay subscribed, because we're trying to get those numbers up. Now let's keep going. Number 4, Scream 6. It's always someone you know. Although Sidney Prescott managed to finally shake Woodsboro's most infamous resident, it seems that the ghost face can't be put down just that easily. Scream 6 is a big departure for the franchise, taking place in New York instead of a small Californian town, and may I just say, it's high time. You know, slashers have been acting like they're too good to make movie sequels about their bad guys going to space or going to New York anymore. Jason did it, and I guess we just decided it just wasn't vogue anymore, but hogwash, I love seeing Ghostface running around the Big Apple. Ghostface on the subway. He's not supposed to be there. What are you doing there, man? The torch of Final Girl has been passed from Sidney Prescott to Tara Carpenter, introduced in the previous film and played by everybody's favorite goth girl, Jenna Ortega. Some other reprising roles include Hayden Panettiere coming back to play Kirby, a fan favorite character from Scream 4 whose death kind of left a bad taste in all of our mouths. So seeing her come back is actually super cool. There was a little Easter egg that confirmed she was alive in Scream 5, so I'm very excited to see her come back. I am a huge Scream fan if that is not coming across. We're also going to see Scream 5's protagonist Sam Carpenter return, and series mainstay Courtney Cox as Gale Weathers. No word on how horrifying her haircut's going to be. It would be a strange Scream film if it didn't have at least one cast member. Losing Neve Campbell and David Arquette definitely hurts, so one legacy member is more than enough. It's being directed by a duo of Tyler Gillett and Matt Bettinelli-Olpin, who worked together to make the last Scream movie, which honestly I thought was pretty good. I know some people had some issues with it, but I really liked it. They also made Ready or Not and had previously collaborated on the horror anthology series VHS. I'm personally super excited for Scream. Of all the slasher franchises out there, and I might land myself in some hot water with this hot take, but I think Scream is the most consistent. I think all of the Scream movies are pretty good. Even the worst Scream movie, Scream 3, is still like leagues better than most of the Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street sequels. giggles. I just love Ghostface. I love that little goof. Although the loss of Wes Craven is definitely felt deeply, the previous film left me as a fan feeling like the series was being taken care of. The meta commentary was top notch, the scares were blood curdling, and there was a good amount of that Scream humor. I cannot wait to find out who's under that mask come March. Number 3, Evil Dead Rise. Groovy. Evil Dead has always been one of my absolute favorite horror movies ever. I love a horror comedy. If you couldn't tell already from my passion for Scream and my excitement for Renfield, and no one has ever done it better than Evil Dead 2, which might genuinely be one of my favorite movies of all time, let alone horror movies. I've probably seen that like 30 or so times. For all the quips, chainsaw arms, time travel, boomsticks, and gallons of fake blood, it's easy to forget that originally Evil Dead started as a low-budget horror movie trying to shock you to sickness with its gore and scares, and was trying to take itself a little bit seriously. The franchise tried to reboot itself about a decade ago, simply titled Evil Dead, hoping to recapture that same feeling of terror and a bunch of teens lost in a cabin. In a departure for the movies, Ash Williams and his chainsaw was nowhere to be found, and the comedy was completely absent unless you consider someone sawing their arm off with a bread cutter hilarious. And if you do, I don't really want to watch any like comedies with you. Well, Rise is set to try one more time at capturing that original gore fest. It seems like it's disconnected from the 80s films and the 2013 reboot and is doing its own thing. Evil Dead Rise sees a pair of estranged sisters reuniting in a cramped Los Angeles apartment, and their reunion is cut short after discovering a flesh-bound book, one Necronomicon Ex Mortis, in the sisters' building, which, well, if you know anything about Evil Dead, you know reading that book is very bad news and pretty much a guarantee that you're going to invite an army of flesh-eating demons into your world. If the trailer is anything to go by, expect Evil Dead Rise to be packed to bursting with gross-out gore, high-octane scares, and not a whole lot of one-liners. Bruce Campbell has an EP credit on this, but he's leaving the boomstick behind for this one. 3 seasons of Ash vs. the Evil Dead was more than enough for him and more than enough for me, so I'm just excited to see some new Evil Dead content regardless. The trailer was super promising and already had me scared, and if they can do that on a video I'm watching on my phone, I cannot even imagine how much popcorn I'm going to be flinging around the theater when I see this in April. Number 2, Saw X. Saw 10. Saw X? Saw 10. Well, we'll decide. I don't know what they want to call it. The games never end. So long as the sun still sets, they will continue making Saw movies. Death, taxes, they're gonna keep making Saw movies. Those are certainties of the world. There's always more inventive ways to show horrific dismemberments and really stretch the definition of what a game is. The franchise has been spinning its wheels for a little bit, with most fans agreeing that there hasn't been a truly great Saw movie in years. Saw 7, The Final Chapter, Jigsaw, and Spiral were all pretty weak entries that disappointed longtime fans. Saw The Final Chapter, ain't that ironic? We were all hoping to see a little bit more of John Kramer, less convoluted plot twists and retcons, and more of what Saw's all about, chaining people to radiators who probably didn't deserve that much torment. While Spiral seemed like a step in the right direction, it did underperform dramatically and wasn't exactly the reboot worthy of saving the series. So longtime Saw collaborators Kevin Grutart and Josh Stolberg came together to pen and direct a script for Saw X. Saw 10. At this time, very little is known about the 10th entry in the splattering series, other than that Tobin Bell, best known for his role as John Kramer and that funny little puppet, will be returning with a main character role. So we can expect lots of Kramer goodness, lots of pre-recorded messages about how much blood victims are going to have to shed to learn important life lessons. Exciting too is Shawnee Smith, who plays Amanda Young, Jigsaw's troubled apprentice from the first 3 Saw movies, is set to return as well. And reports say that it's going to take place at some point during the first and second film, which makes sense since, spoiler alert from a movie from 2004, Jigsaw dies in the 3rd one, so, wasn't a lot to do there. He's capable of a lot of things, but bringing himself back from the dead he hasn't quite nailed yet. Do I think Saw 10 is going to be the best movie ever? Probably not, who's to say, but I absolutely love the Saw series, bones and all, pun intended, for all its ridiculous soap opera level twists, secret apprentices, and just utterly insane death trap, and of course, that little puppet. So I'm excited to spend any time at all in that dirty bathroom one more time. Number 1, Five Nights at Freddy's. Yeah, no, I'm being serious. I'm including this on the list because you know what? I'm genuinely looking forward to it. If you're unfamiliar with the IP somehow, Five Nights at Freddy's is a series of video games about a haunted pizzeria populated by an animatronic cartoon band who's a lot more lively than their stilted animations will suggest. They come to life at night and have a real hunger for just about anything that isn't animatronic. Now the series gets unbelievably complicated, so I'll let someone else more knowledgeable than me explain that. If you're a Five Nights at Freddy's fan, head on over to Top 10 Gaming. They do so much Five Nights stuff. You'll have stuff to watch for years. The mega popular smash hit indie game franchise blew up pretty much overnight. Going from one developer's passion project, a short half-hour scary point-and-click game, became a media empire, spanning 9 games, not including spin-offs, a series of novels and comic books, and a movie that's been in production hell since 2015. The Five Nights movie has passed from multiple creators and teams, and for ages, it seemed like it was never gonna actually materialize and just existed as a sort of vague tease. But as of 2023 though, we have found a team, we've found a script, and we've got some concrete evidence it exists. It's being actively filmed, and it's starring Josh Hutcherson as the doomed security guard, and horror icon Matthew Lillard, famous for playing Shaggy in Scooby-Doo, and the original Ghostface, spoilers, will be playing the villainous owner of the Fazbear franchise. Early reports too said the animatronics in the film will be all practical effects, which if done right will be premium unleaded nightmare fuel. I am a sucker for a practical effect in a horror movie. All bets are on for the Five Nights movie to be a pretty big hit. Jason Blum, the head of Blumhouse, is producing, and Matt Lillard has already agreed to do a trilogy of Five Nights at Freddy's movies. So watch this space when we do top 5 horror movies for 2024, and I mentioned Five Nights at Freddy's 2 in the #1 spot.
In 5th place, we have The Wailing. Rated 18A, it's a 2016 South Korean horror film written and directed by Na Hong-jin and starring Kwak Do-won, Hwang Jun-min, Chun Woo-hee. In the movie, a series of gore-drenched slangs hits home for Jung-gu, a slow-witted cop in a small town, when he discovers that his daughter, Hyo-jin, has become afflicted by, well, whatever is killing his fellow townsfolk. So he is, as the first hour or so suggests, completely out of his depth. And at one point in the film, writer and director minds his story back for, dark humor, and wins viewers over by making our main character look like a lovable screw-up. He's confronted with a mountain of bodies, an evil foreigner with a cabin full of creepy photos, and plague-like omens that manifest in the form of dead ravens, a rock-churning mute, and crazy dreams. The Wailing received widespread critical acclaim. On popular review website Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 99% and an average rating of 8 out of 10, based on 82 reviews. The site's critics' consensus reads, "The Wailing delivers an atmospheric, cleverly constructed mystery whose supernatural thrills more than justify its imposing length." On fellow website Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 81 out of 100 based on 19 critics, indicating, universal acclaim. It was released in South Korea on May 12th of 2016. The film was shown in the out of competition section at the Cannes Film Festival in France on May 18th and was released in the United States on May 27th. It was then released on Netflix at a later date, but it has since been taken off the streaming service. Well, if you'll excuse me, this sounds like something I should perhaps watch, maybe even tonight. In 4th place, we have Repo the Genetic Opera. Call me biased all you want. This beloved train wreck and its sequels are some of my favorite comfort media watches. Where the heck else am I going to see an ensemble like Paul Sorvino, Paris Hilton, Anthony Head, Sarah Brightman, Ogre, Alexa Penavega, and Terrence Dunnock all in the same place? It's like a Tumblr fanfic mess come to life. Oh, and if you didn't gather from the title, it's an actual genuine opera, so it's entirely sung. The movie takes place in the mid-21st century, when an epidemic of organ failures leads to the rise of GeneCo, a company providing transplants at a great price. And by mid-21st century, I mean 2056 to be exact. So a little over 30 years from now. Those who miss their payments become targets of GeneCo mercenaries, who repossess the organs. The CEO of GeneCo, Roddy Largo, discovers he is terminally ill and is adamant that his offspring aren't worthy heirs to his fortune, and instead plans to give his entire fortune to 17-year-old Shiloh Wallace, the daughter of his late ex-fiancé, Marnie. In this crazy world of addiction and legalized killing, Shiloh is a sheltered girl who seeks a cure for her rare disease as well as information about her family's mysterious history. She meets a whole wild crew of folks along the way and learns a lot about her dad. Spoiler alert, it turns out he's been making her sick the entire time to try and protect/cure her, out of guilt from losing his wife. Granted, I didn't super expect a doctor by day who masquerades as a repo killer slasher man by night to be, super ethical. I'm willing to bet though, most of y'all have heard at least one song from this. Does Zydrate come in a little glass vial? Sound familiar? Zydrate is the substance that sedates folks for their surgery in this world, and it's super hecking pricey. Ergo, why most folks buy it secondhand off of dealers. This movie really likes its gore, and since it shares a director with the first 4 Saw films, you can probably get an idea of what to expect visually. Usually, I'm not one for gore, preferring psychological horror, but something about this film just scratched a really happy itch in my brain the first time I saw it, and it has become a favorite ever since. When the film was originally being promoted, due to a lack of studio support, the director, Darren Bousman, and creator killer/grave robber Terrence Dunnick did most of their own promotion by hosting a Repo Road Tour. The tour was set up for one-night screenings in 7 different United States cities and included extensive question and answer sessions following each showing. Because of strong ticket sales, a second and third touring session were added, in addition to a British tour across 4 locations. The film received a limited release in the United States and Canada on November 7th of 2008 and was released in early 2009 on DVD and Blu-ray, featuring 2 audio commentaries, 2 featurettes, the theatrical trailer, and 4 deleted scenes. As much as I'll wax poetic about it, it's not for the faint of heart. The gore alone, never mind watching Paris Hilton's face fall off, can definitely leave an impact. If you do make it through Repo, I highly recommend also giving The Devil's Carnival and its sequel a watch. While they're not direct sequels to Repo, they have the same grit, and the dark circus and religion themes are fabulous. Also, you get the additions of David Hasselhoff and Adam Pascal, which makes it a win in my book. In third place, we have Barbarian. Probably the most recent release on today's list, and rated R. Barbarian came out in 2022 and was picked up by HBO Max, and later got bounced to Disney Plus when it was deemed too scary for the original platform. Netflix never wanted it, adamant it was too scary for their viewers. Documentary researcher Tess has booked an Airbnb and arrives at night in the pouring rain to find a guy named Keith is already staying there. So Keith is played by well-known spooky actor Bill Skarsgård, and if that doesn't ring a bell, he's the current Pennywise the Clown. Ergo, he's dang good at being creepy. He eventually convinces her to stay until they can get this sorted, and since she can see proof of reservation, she decides why not. And being a gentleman, the guy offers to take the couch. As is with many things I watch, my common sense is already screaming, but a trope is a trope. When Tess wakes up in the middle of the night, she's kinda shaken up to find her bedroom door has been opened, but Keith is asleep and assures her he did not touch the door. The next morning she goes for her interview and is warned not to stay in the area where she is staying. Upon returning to the house, she is chased inside by a homeless man who yells at her to leave and winds up locked in the basement, stumbling across a hidden corridor, leading to a room with a camcorder, a stained mattress, and a red handprint. Keith eventually tries to save her, but the pair are attacked by a naked, deformed woman, referred to later as the mother, who kills them. Later on, Airbnb owner AJ is introduced, zipping down some coastal road in a convertible, only to find out in a phone call that he's being accused of doing something horrible to an actress. As someone who very likely did said thing, AJ is more concerned with his career and putting this behind him. So he's been pressured to sell his assets to pay his legal costs, so he travels to Detroit to inspect the house before selling it, and finds the hidden tunnel and tries to measure it, believing it may increase the house's value. So the mother attacks AJ in the tunnel, and he falls into a hole where he meets Tess. A flashback to the 1980s shows Frank, the house's original owner, abducting women, sexually taking advantage of them, and keeping them captive in the tunnels. In the present, the mother locks Tess and AJ in the hole. Tess tells AJ that the mother wants them to act as her children. AJ is then dragged away by the mother, who forcibly breastfeeds him, and Tess uses the opportunity to get the heck out of Dodge. While the summary might not sound super scary and rather cheesy and tropey, it's the use of cinematography and framing that really sets the tone for nightmares for those brave enough to watch. Gore scenes include a head being bashed against a wall until it's a red pulp, eye gouging, which an arm being ripped off and used as a club, a red kaboom wound, and more. If that isn't enough, there's discussion and dialogue about sexual aggression towards women, as well as dialogue about inbreeding. I'm torn between wanting to watch this tonight before bed or waiting for a day off, but let me know what y'all think in the comments. In second place, we have Shrew's Nest. So this is a horror film that was released in 2014 and was deemed too scary for any streaming service until Shudder came to be in 2016, and has been highly praised as one of the original films of the platform. Plot is set in the 1950s in an apartment in Madrid. Agoraphobic main character Montse earns her living by working as a seamstress out of her home, and lost her youth taking care of her younger sister, who's referred to as the girl, who brings, some additional earnings to the household by working at a store outside of the home. Montse is at odds with the prospect of her sister establishing intimate relationships with males, despite the girl actually coming of age. Our main character chooses to hide from reality, feeding an obsessive, unhinged temperament, and experiences visions of her awful father who abandoned the family, mocking her. Carlos, a neighbor of the ladies, falls down the stairs and looks for help knocking on the apartment's door, and Montse, despite, reluctance, eventually proceeds to drag an unconscious and injured Carlos in. She becomes infatuated with him, who, being wounded in the leg, is unable to move out of the bed. During secret meetings of the girl and Carlos, the former advises Carlos to get the heck out of there, and to no success, as Carlos left the altar on his wedding night and is on the run from commitment from his pregnant fiancée, because he doesn't want to deal with the responsibilities as a husband and a father. So, gold star for him. Montse drugs him with morphine, and when he does attempt to escape, she sews his leg to the bed. After killing his fiancé and others, Montse meets her demise at the hands of the girl, who's trying to help Carlos escape. In Montse's last words, the girl finds out that she is actually Montse's daughter, as her grief-stricken father impregnated Montse after the death of Montse's mother. Instead of the dad running away, Montse poisoned him to put an end to his awful behavior on Montse herself and her innocent daughter, keeping her father's body on her bed for weeks before storing his remains in the armoire, and was too ashamed to tell her the truth. I promise not to spoil the actual ending, but it's a doozy. In first place, we have Night of the Living Dead. Yep, the first big modern zombie film. Released in 1968, it was directed, photographed, and edited by George A. Romero, written by Romero and John Russo, and produced by Russell Streiner and Carl Hardman. A crazy group of individuals takes refuge in an abandoned house when corpses begin to leave the graveyard in search of fresh human bodies to devour. Main character Ben does his best to control the situation, but when the reanimated bodies surround the house, the other survivors begin to panic. Any semblance of order within the group begins to dissipate. The zombies start to find ways inside, and one by one, the living humans become the prey of the deceased ones. If you haven't watched it before today, shame on you, because it's a masterpiece and a half. It premiered in Pittsburgh on October 1st of 1968, and it grossed 12 million American dollars domestically and 18 million internationally, earning more than 250 times its budget and making it one of the most profitable film productions ever made at the time. So it was released shortly before the adoption of the Motion Picture Association of America rating system, and the film's explicit violence and gore was considered groundbreaking, leading to a lot of controversy and negative reviews. Its first showing was a weekend matinee, and some folks brought their little ones to it. As someone who scares people for a living and questions when adults bring strollers to a haunted event, this was many times worse, fully traumatizing some of the little ones. Zombies are shown in this eating the organs and entrails of the victims they've killed. A young woman turns into a zombie and impales her mother to death repeatedly with a trowel. Zombies are killed with rifle targets to the head, set on fire, and crushed with tire irons. Humans are trying to survive, but they turn on each other, including one scene in which one man kills another with a kaboom device. It eventually garnered a cult following and critical acclaim, and has appeared on lists of the greatest and most influential films by outlets such as Empire, the New York Times, and Total Film. In 1999, the film was deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant by the Library of Congress and selected for preservation in the National Film Registry. In February 2020, Netflix took down Night of the Living Dead from its streaming service in Germany following a legal request because the film is banned in that country. And that brings us to the end of our time, and I'm feeling the need for a Terrence Dunick triple feature tonight. Who needs sleep when that's an option?
Number 5, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Who doesn't love taking a trip down to the 100-acre woods with Winnie the Pooh and all his funny friends? These beloved childhood characters are ready to shine on the silver screen. In a sequel to Pooh's Heffalump adventure, please welcome Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, an ultra-violent splatterhouse slasher set in the 100-acre woods, reimagining the beloved children's characters as bloodthirsty maniacs who spend a whole lot less time playing around and eating honey and getting stuck in trees and more time chasing people with axes and rusty pickaxes and stuff. Oh bother. Trailers and photos of Blood and Honey went viral pretty much immediately because I think everyone saw it and kind of did the same thing where we were like, that's real? What? Yeah, it is. Copyright law and public domain is a wild, wild thing. Winnie the Pooh is public domain, so you watching at home, if you want to make your own Winnie the Pooh movie, this is my invitation. You go right ahead. So here we are. We have an ultra-violent Winnie the Pooh movie. Something absolutely no one was asking for, but I'm glad we have anyway, because at the very least, I can't claim to have ever seen a movie like this, really. And you know what? Credit where it's due, it does actually look pretty unnerving. Pooh looks the most terrifying he ever has, a far cry from all of our nice memories of him. Piglet as well has gone from like a cute little cutie to like a hillbilly horror. Eeyore, my favorite, he's not around because if the plot summary on IMDb is anything to go by, Winnie the Pooh ate him. He's probably happier now, I guess. That's kind of what he always wanted. I think this will be a fun watch, kind of a movie to get a big pepperoni pizza and some snacks and a few friends around. I don't think it'll win an Oscar, but the novelty will do it for me. If it turns out to be a big success, director Rice Frake Waterfield has spoken out about how he wants to make an entire series of public domain slasher movies, eventually building up to a shared universe because everyone wants some of that sweet, sweet MCU money. Me personally, I would love to see the new Winnie the Pooh going toe-to-toe with Peter Rabbit in a horror movie Alien vs. Predator situation. I know they've had tension for years. Time will tell if this dream will come to light, but pre-production has already started on a Peter Pan movie in a similar vein to Blood and Honey, so expect a blood-soaked trip to Neverland sometime in the near future. But if you can't wait and you want more horror content right now, you don't need to grab a ticket to the movies. You can just stay subscribed to Top 5 Scary for more premium horror content literally every single day. We got scary stuff for every occasion, so click through and I'm certain you'll find something to like. But finish up this one first, okay? We got lots more movies to go. Number 4, Skinamarink. I love a low-down horror. Even better, like a low-down, low-budget found footage horror. Some of my favorite flicks are stuff like Blair Witch Project or VHS. It's a great way for lower-budget productions to stand out, where you can't just rely on tons and tons of gore effects or CGI monsters to serve up scares and have to, you know, use creative filmmaking. So let me introduce Skinamarink, a Canadian experimental horror film made on an absolute shoestring budget that has critics singing praises and double-checking their hallways just to make sure no evil got inside. Skinamarink is about as bare bones as a movie can get. It was made on a budget that was less than the price of most used cars and was shot entirely on digital in the childhood home of the director, which I guess would technically make this a home movie. Skinamarink is one of those ones where really the less you know about it, the better, so I don't want to give too much away, so I'll give you the little IMDb teaser and hopefully that's enough to excite you. The son and daughter of a family wake up in the middle of the night, discover that their father is missing, and discover that something is happening to the house as all windows, doors, and entrances and exits to the outside world appear to just be vanishing. The director, Kyle Edward Ball, is making his cinema debut with Skinamarink, and prior to this he made short films on a YouTube channel inspired by commenters' nightmares that they had when they were young. Skinamarink is no different, with some reviewers pointing out that it was the kind of movie that made them feel like they were young again, wanting to pull a blanket over their eyes, afraid of boogeymen in the dark or monsters under the bed. So if you're looking for tons of action, movie monsters, blood splatters, Skinamarink is not really that at all. But if you want a slower, very down-to-earth, grounded, low-budget horror movie, Skinamarink will have you glued to the scene, glued to the screen. I literally can't read today. I'd say if you're a fan of stuff like the Blair Witch Project, you owe it to yourself to give Skinamarink a shot. Plus, let's shout out as many independent Canadian filmmakers as we can. Number 3, Hellraiser 2022. The original Hellraiser is one of my absolute favorite horror films ever, which I think tells you just about everything you need to know about me. I mean, I love the Cenobites and I love all the sights they have to show me. The original movie is scary, absolutely gut-churningly disgusting, and it's a piece of special effect wizardry that still holds up to this day. It also gave us one of the best, creepiest horror movie icons with Pinhead. Originally dubbed the Priest, the tall, slender demon, or angel to some, who enjoys pleasure and heart-stopping pain in equal measures. So when they announced that they were going to reboot Hellraiser and also recast Pinhead, myself and a lot of fans were more than a little hesitant at a new take on the classic character, but then I found out it was being directed by David Bruckner, who made The Ritual and worked on VHS, and I knew the film was in good hands, and lo and behold, hey, it was pretty good. The visual effects and gore for the new film are some of the best out there. The new design for Pinhead is horrifyingly cool, trading out the old goth kid at a nightclub look for a terrifying flayed skin design, making it look like she's wearing a costume when really she's just naked and had all her skin peeled, which is the most Hellraiser thing ever. And oh yeah, Pinhead's a girl now. Slip that in like it was nothing. For me, a Hellraiser film's most important quality above all else is it goopy and gross. Does it make me want to cover my eyes and not look at whatever's on the screen? Yeah? Then this is a great Hellraiser film, and I want to see more through cracks of my fingers, so give it a watch. I wish this one could have been in theaters. It's streaming on Hulu for those who get that, and available on digital purchase everywhere else. Go in, give it an open mind, if for nothing else than its gross out effects. I know that doesn't really sound like a pleasant selling point for a movie. If you're gonna see Hellraiser, that's exactly what you want. Number 2, Knock at the Cabin. Now, depending on how you feel, M. Night Shyamalan is either a total hack who's been coasting for years on a dwindling reputation, or is a misunderstood auteur who's one of the last unique voices in horror cinema, and it really doesn't seem like there's much wiggle room for where people fall on that guy. So let me know down below in the comments what you think about old M. Night. Genius or total goof? Knock at the Cabin is the newest Shyamalan flick starring Dave Bautista and Jonathan Groff. It's an apocalyptic psychological horror thriller, which is a great combination of words in my opinion. Bautista and Groff play parents of a young girl who are vacationing out in a cabin, but things take a dour turn when the family is apprehended by armed bandits who insist that they've seen prophetic visions of the end of days, and the only way to prevent the apocalypse from claiming the globes will be to sacrifice a member of their own family. That's all the recipe for a good thriller for me. Now, Knock at the Cabin just came out, and I haven't even had time to see it yet. I only get so much time away from the fog. I watch 4 movies a year, to be honest, and they're the same movies I've been watching since I was a kid. So we'll see if it stands the test of time and if it'll be a classic or a flop, but I've heard lots of great things from a lot of my friends who like these kind of movies. So, you know what? We'll catch up to this one and I'll loop back around. I'll let you know how I feel. Keep an eye out for another video like this where I'll bring up Knock at the Cabin again. And number 1, The Exorcist. Hey, wait a second. The Exorcist already came out. That was a long time ago. It came out in 1973. I know they made some sequels and stuff, and you can always crank some more out, But we're getting a brand new Exorcist movie in 2023? Oh, and it's serving as a sequel to the original 1973 film, and disregarding all other sequels in favor of a new timeline. That kind of sounds like what they did with Halloween, you know, in 2018 when that guy David Gordon Green made a Halloween sequel that was a sequel to the original film only, and erased all the other so-so sequels and brought back the old characters and everything, and it was pretty good. And oh, David Gordon Green is directing this Exorcist movie too. So this guy's just got one trick then. He makes sequels to classic horror movies. We don't know a whole lot about the new Exorcist movie. In fact, if you go to IMDb right now, it's officially listed as Untitled The Exorcist Film, which I don't think is the catchiest name. That's probably gonna look a little bit busy on the movie poster. So far, the only confirmed details that we know for certain is that David Gordon Green is directing, and Ellen Burstyn will be reprising her role as the mother from the original Exorcist film. Just like how Jamie Lee suited up to beat Michael Myers around the block in Halloween 2018. Now, will this new Exorcist movie be good? Personally, I'm pretty optimistic. The 2018 Halloween is fantastic, and is my opinion the second best Halloween movie ever made, after the first one, which carries a lot for me. The other two in the trilogy didn't do much for me, but that's neither here nor there. We've had a lot of good possession movies coming out. The Conjuring franchise is mostly about that, so I think it would be pretty cool to see a new one from a guy who we all know can deliver a good legacy horror sequel and can bring up some scares and respect an old franchise.